Chapter 1. A sudden rainstorm hit in the early hours of the morning. The wind outside was bleak and the noise overwhelming. Nina Norris went on her scheduled rounds and saw the curtains fluttering by a patient's bed. The window was partially open, allowing fine tendrils of rain to spray in, soaking the windowsill. She sighed and walked over quickly. Just as she was closing the window, a massive clap of thunder crashed overhead, startling her so much her hand nearly slipped. Returning to the nurse's station, Nina rubbed her stiff neck and couldn't help but yawn before leaning over the counter to write her records. Sasha Summers sat across from her, typing on a keyboard. She reminded her, while you were away, messages kept coming in. Nina's phone was charging, so she hadn't taken it with her. She looked up at the digital clock in the hallway. It was midnight. Finishing the writing at hand, she clicked her pen cap shut and put it away. Let me see. Sasha unplugged the phone from under the opposite desk and teased her as she handed it over. Is your boyfriend unable to sleep because he misses you? Nina pressed her lips together in a smile. Taking the phone, she saw that they were indeed all from Evan. Been caught up with a lot of things these past few days. I'll come see you when I'm done. Night shift today? Didn't bring your phone, miss you. I'm going to sleep first. Make sure you get some rest. Her heart warmed as she read them. She knew he was tired from work today too. He hadn't replied promptly to her previous messages, but fortunately they were both thinking of each other. That concern was enough. Nina stared at the miss you message, grinning foolishly for a while before finally replying, I miss you too. After sending it, she stared at the screen for another moment. There was no reply. He must have fallen asleep. She turned and walked into the workspace, sitting down next to Sasha, scrolling through old chat logs on her phone. Sasha glanced over and couldn't help teasing, I say, you two are so sweet every day. Why don't you just tie the knot already? Give our department some candy to eat. I haven't sensed any celebratory vibes in a long time. Nina blushed. It's not that fast. We haven't even met the parents yet. Sasha suddenly thought of something and tapped her. Hey, I remember your birthday is in a few days, right? Why don't you take this opportunity to bring him home? Just say your parents want to see him. That's half the battle won right there. Nina was thin-skinned and couldn't make that call. She was also afraid he might misunderstand that she was in a rush. She shook her head. We've only known each other for a few months. Besides, I think things are fine as they are. Let nature take its course. Sasha nodded, then suddenly mocked herself. Forget it. Why am I worrying blindly? I should care about myself. I need to get unsingle this year so I stop getting bylaid on by you guys for dates. Nina smiled and put away her phone to get back to work. Evan was truly busy these past few days. Most of the time, he was unreachable. When Nina waited for him to contact her, it was usually deep in the night. She had been on duty for several consecutive days, either the early night shift or the late night shift, occasionally working overtime. She rambled to him about some annoying work matters, went around in a big circle, and finally tested the waters. Are you free tomorrow? They were on the phone. The other end listened quietly, paused for a moment, then said, I'm free. Nina didn't remind him that tomorrow was her birthday. She only said, I happen to be on rotation for a day off. He sounded very calm on his end. She couldn't discern his emotions. Then I'll pick you up from work tomorrow morning. Nina fell silent for a moment, guessing whether he actually remembered. Is it the usual time? He asked. Nina responded, MHM, he understood. You'll see me when the sun comes up. She curved her lips in a silly smile. Miss me? He asked again before hanging up. It seemed he loved asking that lately. A patient's family member happened to walk by, and the early morning was exceptionally quiet. She covered the phone with her hand and whispered secretly, more than yesterday. Nina barely closed her eyes in the latter half of the night. When she got tired from working, the thought of seeing him at dawn gave her a burst of energy. Counting the days, they hadn't seen each other for almost a week. Thinking of this, she picked up the small mirror on the desk. The reflection showed dark, tired circles under her eyes, all from staying up late these past few days. If she met him like this, she'd surely be disliked. So, when the first light of dawn appeared and she finished her shift handover, Nina quickly went to the locker room. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, and applied powder, mainly to cover those heavy dark circles. Only when they were invisible did she pack up her locker and leave. She looked down at the time as she walked out. She had delayed by about 5 minutes. Just then, a message came in from Evan. "I see you." Nina looked up. She had reached the lobby. People were coming and going before her eyes. The soft light of the morning sun shrouded the entrance, casting a pale warmth. Near the medical pamphlet rack at the entrance stood a man. He was wearing a white shirt and black trousers, his figure upright, legs long. He had one hand in his pocket holding his phone, the other hidden behind his back. He stood there casually, a calm and composed smile on his face, as if he had been waiting for a while. Nina stared blankly for a moment, an unconscious smile breaking out on her face. She ran over quickly, stopped in front of him, and looked him up and down in surprise. "Since when do you dress so formally?" "I can't dress like this." His eyes held a slight smile. He looked her over as well, then said, "Long time no see." Nina naturally took his arm and they walked out together. She deliberately acted aggrieved. "Yeah, haven't seen you for days. I thought you didn't want me anymore." "I would not want you." After walking just a few steps, he suddenly, like a magic trick, raised a huge bouquet of red roses in front of her eyes. "Happy birthday." Nina stopped in her tracks immediately, disregarding that they were by the roadside. Her gaze was completely captivated by the bright red bouquet. She let go of him and reached out to take it. The bouquet almost covered her face. She stared for a long time before sighing, "It's so beautiful, as long as you like it." He rubbed her head, pulled her into his embrace, hooked his arm around her shoulder, and continued walking. Once out of the hospital, Nina finally moved her eyes away from the flowers, looked up, and asked joyfully, "You remembered my birthday?" He curled his lips. "Could a boyfriend not know that?" Hearing this, her heart felt satisfied. She couldn't suppress the upward curve of her mouth. Disregarding the crowd around them, she hugged his waist tightly and said, "You must be tired from being busy these days, right? You feel like you've lost quite a bit of weight." He nodded. "There were some matters to deal with, but I can accompany you today. Where do you want to go?" Nina did some mental calculations, but couldn't decide immediately. He added, "You haven't slept all night, right? How about going to my place to catch up on sleep?" Nina thought about it. "That works too." Speaking of which, they had arrived at the car. Nina glanced at the license plate and said, "This doesn't seem to be your car." He smiled. "My brother went abroad, so he lent it to me to drive." The car door opened. Nina sat inside, protected by his hand over her head. She couldn't help laughing. "I wouldn't hit my head anyway." He closed the door, went around to the other side to get in, and then drove onto the road. It was early morning. The sunlight was thin, and the streets were filled with the morning rush hour traffic. Facing the morning light, Nina narrowed her eyes in exhaustion. Suddenly, she felt her hand being squeezed tightly. She turned her head and opened her eyes, hearing him speak hesitantly. "Actually, there's something I haven't warned you about in advance." Nina was confused. "What is it?" "We're going to my house later," she laughed. "We are going to your house. Didn't we go there last time?" "I mean back to my parents' house," he interrupted abruptly. "Taking you to meet them." Nina's eyes went wide. "What?" 3 minutes later, they found a roadside fruit shop and parked the car. As soon as they got out, Nina complained softly, "Why didn't you say so earlier? I haven't prepared anything." He followed behind her. "You don't need to prepare, just follow my lead." "But I can't go empty-handed." Nina scratched her head anxiously. As soon as she entered, she went towards the imported fruit section, but looking at the prices, she felt the pain it cost nearly a month's salary. He, however, said nothing and directly carried several large boxes to the checkout counter. She quickly caught up, whispering, I didn't bring that much money." He smiled at her. "A meeting gift, you owe me. Pay me back next time we meet your parents." She was slightly stunned. "Huh," he pinched her cheek. "What, still weighing things in your mind?" She blushed. No, in her heart, she thought, Sasha, that big mouth, actually guessed right. Nina originally thought the Evans family was just a bit wealthier than average people. She didn't expect them to live in a high-end estate where every inch of land was worth gold. The car drove in, circled half the central fountain, and approached a magnificent, European-style villa that was solemn and grand. Just admiring the exterior made Nina feel timid. Comparing it to her own family's conditions, she was clearly marrying up. Seeing she wasn't speaking, he comforted her. "My parents are quite easygoing. Just treat it as showing your face. Just relax." Nina pinched her fingers and asked uneasily, "Have you talked to them about me?" "I have. Talk so much they can't wait to see you." Nina chuckled. "Then what if they don't like me after seeing me?" he said with certainty. As long as I like you, they have no objections. She was amused. You're that confident? He said. I don't do things I'm not confident about. What Nina didn't expect was that meeting the Evans parents for the first time did indeed ease her nervous heart. Both elders looked very kind, smiling as they looked her over, as if they had been looking forward to this for a long time. Nina, however, didn't dare relax. She sat formally, occasionally being scrutinized by them, returning their gaze with a polite smile. A servant brought morning tea, serving it cup by cup. Miss Norris just got off work? Mrs. Evans asked with a smile. Nina nodded. Mrs. Evans, you can just call me Nina like Evan does. Mrs. Evans paused slightly, then smiled. Nina, that's a lovely name. Nina smiled warmly. I hear. Mrs. Evans's eyes shifted, looking at her again. I hear your parents are both retired teachers. Nina nodded earnestly and replied, they used to teach at the first middle school. My mom retired last year and my dad retired this year. But they're just idle at home, reading newspapers and raising flowers and birds. Mr. Evans looked stern, his face extremely similar to Evan's, but when he looked at her, he was gentle. Then, when Nina's parents are free, let's call them out to meet and have a meal together. Nina never expected that after just a few sentences, the other party would be so direct. She gaped for a moment before making a sound. Okay, Mr. Evans, I'll go back and discuss it with my parents. After speaking, she pursed her lips, thinking a lot about how to tell her parents. She turned back to look at the person beside her, but he was drinking tea calmly, as if he had planned this all along. Out of the corner of his eye, seeing her looking at him, he continued to drink leisurely until the tea slid down his throat, a very faint smile spilling from the corner of his mouth. Chapter 2, Leaving the Evans residence, Nina still hadn't fully recovered her senses. Things had gone so smoothly it seemed preordained. She had merely shown her face, and everything was arranged like a ceremony solemn and formal. Looking back and remembering the way the Evans parents looked at her, there was an indescribable strangeness, seemingly mixed with a complex emotion that was hard to define. Yet the outcome was good. She walked down the steps in a trance. Her hand was taken by the person beside her, and she heard him say, "We're going to my place now." Oh. Looking at his profile, she felt she was overthinking things. Nina got back into the car with him. Before long, they left the residential area, heading downhill toward the city center. The sun had risen high. The car crossed the river. The water's surface was sparkling, flashing with golden light. 20 minutes later, they stopped in front of an apartment building. Nina looked outside, puzzled. You moved? I don't live there anymore. He unbuckled his seatbelt and got out of the car. Nina followed him down and asked, Why did you suddenly move here? He put his arm around her shoulder and walked inside. It's close to your hospital here. Just come here after work from now on. She realized then that, indeed, the walk from here to the hospital was no more than 10 minutes. They walked in together. At the elevator lobby, she asked again, You moved in just these past few days? He pressed the button on the wall, watching the changing floor numbers. MHM. Nina remembered his family's company was in the financial district along the river on the east side of the city. Driving would take at least a bit longer than before, not to mention the metro construction nearby causing traffic jams. She thought it was quite troublesome. Isn't that inconvenient for work? He acted as if it was nothing and casually suggested, You can move out of your home too. Tell your parents. I'll help you move your luggage when the time comes. Nina considered it and thought it was feasible, so she agreed. After entering the elevator and going up, he opened the door but stayed outside, quickly operating the electronic lock. Then he said to her, Press with your thumb. Nina followed his instructions and pressed it. With the fingerprint recorded, he stepped aside to let her in first, saying, The passcode is your birthday. Nina made a sound of affirmation. She hadn't expected him to be so meticulous, while she had questioned whether he even remembered. Once inside, he closed the door behind them and asked her, Hungry? I ate at the cafeteria this morning. Then go take a nap. I'll take you out to eat when you wake up. As he spoke, he walked towards the bedroom. Nina followed, passing through various parts of the apartment, taking a rough tour. She realized the apartment was quite large, and the style was quite different from where he lived before. Peeking into the bedroom, the furnishings were organized, demonstrating the owner's meticulousness. The bed was covered with a dark, thin quilt, and everywhere visible was tidy and clean. Nina stood there for a moment. He took a set of pajamas from a closet door to the side and handed them to her. "Go take a shower. You'll sleep more comfortably." She took it and looked it over. The silky material felt very smooth, though the style was conservative. She hadn't expected him to prepare even this in advance. She couldn't help but feel surprised and delighted. Next door was the bathroom. After entering, Nina closed the door, looked around for a moment, and saw herself in the mirror before the sink. She took off her clothes and went under the shower head. Halfway through washing, she heard the door handle turn. Suddenly, he walked in. Nina was quite startled. She hadn't locked the door because she felt they had already done that, but she was surprised he entered without even a greeting. She turned slightly sideways to cover herself and asked, "Why did you come in?" He answered directly, "To wash with you." Nina was stunned. How could they wash together? Could she even finish her shower? The sound of water trickled in her ears. Before she could think it through, he had already walked into the shower stall. The space originally for one was immediately occupied by two. He didn't give an inch. She retreated to the corner, the water flowing between them. Nina blushed instantly. She hadn't expected him to be so domineering, not even granting her private space to shower. The atmosphere of silence grew heavier. Afraid of losing her balance, she turned her head and said, "I'm done washing. Let me go out first, okay?" The water pressure was turned up. She couldn't hear what he responded. All negotiation was drowned out in the narrow space. A head rested on her left shoulder. He lowered his head and kissed her. Gradually, he seemed to lose his reason. Nina had never seen him like this. The shower was still running. She closed her eyes, too tired to say a word. Finally, he grabbed a bath towel to dry her off and carried her to the bed. Nina hadn't slept for half the night. Now, with double the exhaustion, she couldn't help but close her eyes after lying down for only a moment. She woke up again because she heard a ringtone. Her phone was ringing. Nina opened her eyes and saw, in the dim light shining through the semi-sheer curtains, the man standing at the head of the bed, holding her phone and silencing it. He was still dressed the same as in the morning, perfectly groomed, impeccable. Nina was dazed for a moment before realizing where she was, what she had done before, and why she had slept so dead to the world. "Awake?" the person above asked. Nina didn't have the face to look at him. She pulled the quilt high with both hands to cover her whole head and complained aggrievedly, "Just now, I was so tired." He seemed to chuckle, then sat down by the bed, speaking in a negotiating tone, "I know you're tired, so I'll allow you to sleep a bit longer. We leave in half an hour." She didn't make a sound, not because she couldn't answer, but because she didn't want to face it yet. Although this kind of thing was mutual, she still couldn't let go, especially under his fierce offensive. It was completely like going off the rails, a feeling of losing control with no return. She gripped the edge of the quilt tightly with both hands, processing that slight awkwardness in her heart, convincing herself it was because he loved her so much that he was like this. Thinking this way, she felt ashamed again, feeling she wasn't doing nearly as well as he was. While letting her thoughts run wild for a while, her clenched hand felt something wrong. Her thumb felt over her knuckle. She actually felt a thin band on her ring finger. She paused, quickly brought her hand before her eyes to look, and sure enough, a ring was tightly fitted on it. Just a nap, and suddenly this thing was on her hand. "Just noticed." He pulled the quilt down, staring at her face with a smile. She turned the ring, the size was perfect. She asked, "Did you put it on while I was sleeping?" "How else? Did you want to refuse?" Her heart was already blooming with joy, but she deliberately talked back, "You haven't even formally proposed, trying to muddle through like this." He looked into her eyes and smiled. "Since you don't want it, you can give it back to me." She immediately clenched her fist and pulled back, full of protectiveness. "You already gave it to me, there's no logic in returning it." Hearing this, the corners of his eyes lifted slightly. He nodded, then suddenly leaned down, his forehead pressing against hers, breath mingling between them. "You said it yourself. Since you're wearing it, don't even think about giving it back to me." Nina thought he was provoking her. She gave a light humph and went back to admiring the ring. Nina thought that within half a day, she had experienced enough surprises meeting the parents, receiving a ring, receiving flowers, deciding to move in together. But she didn't expect the afternoon to have a continuation. He had booked a restaurant in advance to celebrate her birthday, ordered a custom birthday cake, and halfway through the meal, a violinist suddenly played the birthday song for her. There was even a mysterious small gift. It was lively and made bystanders envious. After the meal, they went to a movie and walked around the streets for a while. Perhaps she was too happy. She did almost all the talking throughout the day. Most of the time, he listened silently, occasionally replying with a sentence or watching her with a smile the whole time without a single word of objection or opinion. At night, he took her home. Downstairs, she parted with him reluctantly. Her heart felt moved and she turned back to call him Evan. He stood there and responded softly. When she walked closer, she held his hands tightly. I don't think I've said it yet. I love you. Under the street lamp, her eyes gathered light, exceptionally affectionate and moving. With the light behind him, his face cast in shadow, he looked at her too. After a long pause, he said, Me too. Over the next few days, both got busy with work again, but they stayed in contact privately. Since that night she went home and laid her cards on the table with her parents, the two adults were full of curiosity and joy. So, the two families quickly scheduled a time to meet. The whole process was smooth. Both sides were easygoing people. Although one side was in business and the other in education, there was plenty to talk about. Finally, returning to the main topic, they all said they agreed with the children's ideas. As long as the kids were willing, it was fine. Getting the parents' approval was a big step forward. Soon, 2 days later, coincidentally a lucky date, the two agreed to go to City Hall to get their marriage certificates. As for the wedding ceremony, they didn't discuss it for now. Don't modern couples strictly show off their marriage certificates first anyway? While waiting in line for their number, Nina was incredibly excited inside. Thinking that soon she would be married to the person she liked, settling the major event of her life, nothing could be happier than this. At the time, that was what she thought. At least, for the week after getting the license, she still thought so. Chapter 3, After getting the marriage license, Nina took a few days off. She used the time to pack 2 suitcases at home, bringing all her clothes and daily necessities. Evan's car transported them to his residence, making her commute much more convenient. When she returned to work, Nina bumped into Sasha at the nurse's station. She couldn't resist revealing the fact that she was married. As a result, this big mouth turned around and spread the news throughout the entire ER. Even the delivery guy who occasionally brought mineral water heard about it. That delivery guy had a secret crush on Nina and tried to chat her up every time he came. Learning this situation, he retreated in defeat. Seeing his dejected back, Sasha gloated, "See that? A married woman. No one will pounce on you anymore." Nina went to get a cup of water, turned back, and looked at her amusingly. "You say it like no one wanted me. Weren't you the one anxiously hoping I'd get married quickly?" Sasha took the opportunity to give herself credit. "Hey, tell me, am I a lucky charm? I urged you to marry, and you really got married. If my next step is to say you're pregnant, will you really get pregnant?" Nina took a sip of water and sat down, joking back, "Then you'd be the stork goddess. I'll award you a banner then. You should transfer to obstetrics quickly. Staying in the ER is a waste." Sasha sighed, complaining as usual. "I want to switch, but it's not that easy. Shifts day and night, I don't even have time for blind dates. You've got it good, got the certificate straight away. Your man makes so much money. I bet it won't be long before he stops letting you work." "He won't." Nina didn't care about that point. Staying at home is boring too. Since he bought an apartment nearby, it counts as him supporting me. Sasha was envious. She leaned in curiously. "Didn't you say he gave you a diamond ring? Where is it? Let me see." Nina held out her bare hand and laughed. "Why wear a ring to work? I left it at home." In the evening, several injured patients were brought into the ER consecutively. The colleagues in the department were so busy their feet didn't touch the ground. When they were finally free, they had missed the cafeteria's dinner time. Sasha dug out a collection of takeout menus and ordered 2 portions of casserole pasta for her and Nina. Before long, someone delivered the packed food. Both were starving. After finding someone to cover for them, they rushed into the break room to eat. Nina took 2 bites and picked up her phone to check messages. Half an hour ago, she had received one. "Have you eaten?" She put down her chopsticks and replied, "Eating now, starving to death." She also took a photo of the casserole pasta and sent it to him. 5 seconds later, he sent, "Remember to eat on time in the future." Nina had eaten lunch with him. Calculating the time, it had been a while. She asked, "Have you eaten?" He replied, "Ate already." She asked, "Still at the office?" He replied, "Just getting ready to go back." "I'll pick you up tonight." That would be after midnight. She didn't want to mess up his sleep schedule, so she sent, "You sleep early. I'll ride my bike back, I'll be home in a bit." He asked, "Where did you get a bike?" She typed, "It's the one you bought me last time." "I've kept it at the hospital, haha, did you forget?" He realized, "I did forget. Be safe on the road." She sent, "Moi, love you." After rushing to finish eating, it was back to shuttling between the hallway and the lobby. By the time she clocked out, Nina's arms were so tired she could barely lift them while taking off her nurse's uniform. Sasha teased, "Go back and let your hubby give you a massage." Nina laughed. "He's tired from working overtime lately too." Sasha said ambiguously, "Then you two massage each other." Nina quickly shooed her away. Walking out of the main entrance of the ER lobby to the bike shed next to the comprehensive building, Nina found the pink cruiser bike Evan had given her. She dusted off the seat and rode away. The streets late at night were still brilliantly illuminated and busy. Soon, she arrived downstairs at the apartment complex. Nina parked the bike in the lobby on the first floor, then took the elevator up, yawning. As soon as she opened the door, the room instantly lit up. Nina looked up. He was standing by the entryway, wearing pajamas, waiting for her. "You're not asleep?" She was surprised and warmed. She went up and hugged him. "Didn't I tell you to sleep first?" He leaned out to close the door behind her and pulled her inside. "Can't sleep without you." "Then what if I didn't come back all night?" he said. "Then I'd go find you." She pushed him away with a smile. "What nonsense are you talking about? Hurry up and go to sleep. I'll be there after a shower." He let go of her and went into the bedroom. Nina went to shower. Cleaning up in a flash, she returned to the room softly, lifted the corner of the quilt on one side, and just as she lay down, she was scooped up by a pair of arms. Caught off guard, she bumped into a warm, solid chest and naturally hugged him back. He seemed to have been waiting for this moment all night. He pressed her head against his chest, resting his chin on top of her head, a pose full of greedy control. Nina shifted slightly, finding a comfortable position to close her eyes. They held each other in silence. After a while, hearing his breathing become even, she thought he was asleep. Just as she wanted to move, she felt the hair on her forehead being brushed aside and cool lips printed upon it. She didn't move again, letting him kiss from her forehead to her brow bone, bridge of nose, and finally her lips and teeth. Her body was exhausted, but in her drowsy consciousness, she returned the kiss. Gradually, he suddenly appeared above her, kissing down from directly above. Nina sensed his intention. Slowly opening her eyes, she pushed him and said, "Not these few days. It's not my safe period." His breathing was heavy. In the darkness, he pulled open the drawer of the nightstand and fumbled around. Nina knew what he was looking for and whispered, "You used them all last time." "When?" He indeed didn't find any. He withdrew his hand in resignation, still pressing on her, his aura intense. "Hasn't it only been a few nights?" She was embarrassed herself, mumbling, "That day you used 2 at once." He seemed to just realize it, gave a soft chuckle in the dark, then rolled off. Pulling her into his arms, he gritted his teeth slightly and said, "I'll save you some energy today. Remember to buy some tomorrow." Nina muttered inwardly, a whole box didn't last long. Where did he get the energy? She complied and didn't dare move, afraid he might change his mind the next second. Finally waiting until that part of him recovered to its original state comfortably, she gradually fell asleep. When Nina woke up the next day, the person beside her had already gone out. She rubbed her eyes, got up to make something simple to eat, and didn't stay idle afterward. In the morning light streaming through the window, she tidied up the messy corners of the room. Calling it messy wasn't quite right. It wasn't dirty. The apartment was still new, just gathering some light dust. There weren't many things in the cabinet drawers either, mostly documents and drafts from his work, as well as files and business contracts of his employees. Guessing they weren't too important since he hadn't taken them, Nina flipped through a few pages casually. Without understanding much of the content, she glanced at the signature line on the last page. It was also blank. Nothing interesting, so she closed them all and stacked them neatly in a prominent place. Approaching noon, she took out the trash she had collected. She wanted to stop by the nearby supermarket. In the elevator, she met someone from property management who asked, "Excuse me, are you the owner of Unit 2101? Nina had lived there for a few days, sometimes coming and going with Evan, so she was quickly recognized by the property staff. Yes, she nodded. The other person had a modest smile on his face. It's like this, we've created a group chat for the complex. The owners are all in it, so everyone can get to know each other and help each other out. Nina didn't refuse. She took out her phone right then to connect with him and joined a large group. Seeing there were already many people inside, Nina asked, "Can only one person join per household?" The staff member smiled. "You can join with two." Nina thanked him for the information. She originally wanted to add Evan too, but considering he usually didn't have time for such things, she decided to handle it herself. Nina rode her bike to the supermarket, bought some vegetables and meat, stocked up on daily necessities, and finally, seeing the contraceptives at the checkout, grabbed 2 boxes. While waiting to pay, she pinched the boxes in her hand. Calculating in her mind, it didn't feel enough, so she went back and grabbed 2 more. Unexpectedly, he came back early that evening. Taking advantage of the extra time, he used 3 at once. He tried various tricks to make her learn new knowledge, as if reclaiming what was lost last night in full measure. Nina couldn't help calling his name and begging for mercy, but he became even more relentless, like a madman, leaving her unable to form sentences. She swallowed hard, trying to catch her breath to speak, but he kissed her lips shut. When everything returned to calm, Nina lay panting in his arms, hearing him ask, "What did you do today?" She didn't have the strength to answer. Shivering for a good while before she gave a brief account. He listened to everything. When he learned she had joined the community group chat, there was a slight silence. She didn't notice and continued, "The people in the complex are so interesting. As soon as I joined, they asked what I do. I said I'm at the 2nd hospital, and they said they'd rely on me for medical care in the future." He stroked her back and said, "They're joking with you, just take care of yourself. If I can help, I'll help. It's just a small effort anyway. As long as you're happy." The next day, Nina woke up naturally for the morning shift. The person beside her was still deep asleep. She opened her eyes, yawned lightly, and went into the bathroom to wash up. When she came out, she heard a message notification sound. Thinking it was her phone, she walked over but found it was his. She didn't look and turned to leave the room to find her own phone. Searching around, she forgot where she put it last night. Time was tight, so she simply took his phone to call hers. Just as she lit up the screen, a message at the top came into full view. "President Evans, I waited for you all night. Are you coming tonight?" Followed by a row of rose emojis. Nina froze. From initial puzzlement to gradual realization, she turned her head to look at the person lying on the bed. Still wearing her pajamas, she felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her head. Chapter 4, the phone in her hand felt as heavy as iron. Nina's mind was a mess. The more she stared at that message, the more it stung her eyes. Time ticked by and the screen automatically went dark. She put the phone back and left the room quietly. She searched outside again but still couldn't find her phone. Estimating she was running out of time, she simply gave up looking, grabbed a jacket, and left. The early autumn morning carried a chill. Nina bought breakfast by the roadside. Once at the hospital, she took it out, but burdened by her thoughts, the food tasted like nothing. Sasha wasn't there today, and no one was chatting in her ear. It was suddenly very quiet, making her feel even more down and bewildered. Several times she reached into her pocket, didn't feel her phone, and felt a wave of inexplicable irritability. Past 8 a.m., she visited the ward area to communicate with patients' families and convey the doctor's instructions again. After staying for about 5 minutes, a colleague pushed a cart over and passed a message to her. "Someone is looking for you at the nurse's station." Nina was chatting with a family member and responded absently. The colleague walked past, turned back, and added, "Looks like your boyfriend." "No, should be your husband now." Nina paused, gave a distracted "oh," explained a few more things to the family, and once they finally understood and expressed gratitude, she slowly walked out of the ward area. It wasn't a long walk, just a few dozen meters, but Nina didn't want to go over so quickly. The message she saw this morning was still like a thorn in her brain, making her think wildly and unable to work well. Although she wanted to ask him the reason to his face, she wasn't a straightforward person. Encountering such unclear situations, her first reaction was panic and withdrawal. A few steps, a turn around the corner, and she arrived. As soon as Nina approached, she saw a tall man standing by the outside of the nurse's station, waiting patiently and silently. Several colleagues inside were secretly sizing him up. He happened to turn his head, saw her, hooked the corner of his mouth, and walked towards her. Nina tried to pull a smile to respond but failed. "Why are you here?" She even felt guilty, wondering if he knew she had seen it. He reached her, standing very close. He extended a hand and offered it to her. "You forgot to take this." Nina looked down. It was the phone she couldn't find. "Oh." She took it as if she hadn't noticed anything and put it directly into her pocket. "Didn't see it this morning. I was in a rush." "In a bad mood?" He stared at her. Nina's gaze drifted to passers-by. "No," he tilted his head to look at her. "Not asking where I found it?" she asked dully. "Where?" He smiled with pursed lips. "Wedged inside the sofa." Nina understood what he meant. Probably last night when she was sitting on the sofa looking at her phone, he suddenly got in the mood and entangled her right there. Later, moved to the bed, her mind was in chaos, and she didn't remember where the phone dropped. She hurriedly twitched the corner of her mouth and urged him, "You'll be late for the office, right?" There was no anxiety on his face. He suddenly said, "Something's wrong with you." Nina's heart thumped. She thought her smile must look awkward. "Nothing is wrong." He didn't give her a chance to hide. "I can see there's something on your mind." Nina wrung her hands in agitation. His gaze moved down, so she separated them, leaving them nowhere to rest. Neither spoke, standing quietly in a standoff at the corner as people walked by. He eyed her for a few seconds, then suddenly took out his own phone, tapped rapidly on it, and held the screen in front of her eyes. Nina focused on it and saw the message from this morning. The time and content were identical. She was speechless, her heart drumming, and looked up at him. He looked back at her and explained clearly right then, "I have no relationship with her. Never did before, never will in the future." Nina opened her mouth, not knowing where to start. She indeed harbored doubts, but she didn't expect him to say it first, shutting her up before she was even ready to speak. She pursed her lips. Since it was so, she might as well ask, "Who is she?" "Business contact, one-sided interest." He said it like a guarantee. "I will minimize contact with her in the future." His answer was crisp and decisive, leaving no room for picking holes. For a moment, she lost her excuse for being willful and awkward, as if clearing the air on the spot. Nina thought to herself, if he hadn't said it and she hadn't brought it up, a misunderstanding would naturally build up. Conflict is truly a dreadful thing. "Why tell me this all of a sudden?" she asked guiltily. "When you looked this morning, I woke up." She certainly hadn't expected that. She felt extremely embarrassed for a moment. After all, peeking was the initial wrong, not good behavior. She didn't know how to continue, stammering, "I didn't mean to." He took one of her hands, his gaze falling on her lowered face without blame. "I hope, in the future, whatever it is, you'll say it clearly to my face." She pursed her lips and nodded gently. "Also the phone," he reminded. "Carry it with you at all times." With the misunderstanding cleared, Nina's mood brightened considerably, but a trace of gloom still shrouded a certain corner, vague and inexplicable. Until a few days later, in the afternoon, she was temporarily called to the director's office. He was busy handing over a part of his tasks and asked her to make follow-up calls to several patients with records of emergency resuscitation. Nina followed the instructions, took the list back to the nurse's station, and made the follow-up calls one by one. The first few were fine. All said their conditions were currently stable or they had gone to other hospitals, with nothing serious at the moment. When she reached the sixth one, she called, but no one answered. Nina looked at the record from that time: congenital heart disease, sudden attack, resuscitation. The time was 3 months ago. She hadn't reported to the ER back then, so she had no impression of it. The contact info only listed a name and a mobile number. She redialed, and while waiting, focused on the name column. Ethan Evans. Also surnamed Evans, Nina thought. After a while, someone answered this time, but it was a woman. "Hello, President Evans is in a meeting. I am his secretary. May I ask who is calling?" President Evans. Nina frowned slightly, then adopted her official tone. "Hello, this is the emergency department of the Provincial Second People's Hospital. Regarding a medical visit record from a few months ago, we would like to do a follow-up inquiry. If Mr. Evans doesn't have time right now, could you please pass on the message and hope he can return a call when free?" The other party noted it politely. Okay, I will pass it on. Thank you. Nina hung up but didn't recover for a long time. Who is Ethan Evans? A sudden curiosity emerged, as if she should know this person. Opening a web page, she followed her whim and typed in Ethan Evans. Countless people with the same name popped up. Immediately, not knowing what she was thinking, she typed in the abbreviation of Evans Family Company and searched again. This time, the content was more refined, indicating a direct relationship between the two. Ethan Evans was indeed a person at the Evans Family Company, and they shared the surname. Nina suddenly thought of the brother Evan occasionally mentioned. Although they had never met, she knew he had a biological brother above him, just mostly on business trips abroad. Maybe it was him. If he was back now, and if this was true, his family should know about this medical report. Nina was somewhat apprehensive, knowing this illness wasn't trivial. She continued browsing images. Searching around, she found a few group photos, but only saw Evan. She didn't see anyone who might be his suspected brother. She closed the webpage, skipping over Ethan Evans, and continued calling the people later on the list. Yet, inside, the more she thought, the more she felt something was wrong. Receiving no return call from any Ethan Evans that day, Nina temporarily forgot about this character. Returning home late at night, seeing Evan still awake waiting for her, she went up to give him a hug as usual. Suddenly, she recalled and asked, "Is your brother back from abroad?" He closed the door for her, giving a faint response, "MHM. When did he get back?" Nina rarely heard him mention him, hadn't met him, and didn't even have a general impression. "Is your brother named Ethan?" "MHM," he asked. "How did you know?" She walked to the kitchen to pour a glass of water and told him the hospital incident directly, including her online search findings. Finally, she sighed, "Your brother is really mysterious. You never talk about him usually, and the photos I found were all of you. I couldn't figure out which one was him. Do you look very different?" "No," he denied. Nina poured another cup, not understanding. "No what?" "Quite the opposite, Nina." Calling her name as he approached, he suddenly informed her in a solemn tone, "The person you saw online is Ethan Evans." Nina held the water glass, blinking blankly, frowning in slow comprehension. "What does that mean?" He explained fully, giving her completely subversive information. "We look exactly the same. We're twins." Chapter 5. It was the first time Nina had grasped this concept, and for a moment she thought he was joking. "You're not lying to me?" She stared at him blankly, then carefully scrutinized his features and brows. A faint suspicion floated into her heart. His eyes held a slight guilt. "I should have told you sooner." She couldn't digest it in such a short time, only murmuring, "You look so alike." His palm rested on her shoulder, stroking gently. "Afraid of recognizing the wrong person?" She shook her head, but her mind was in a trance. An indescribable thought emerged. A corner of her heart was quietly losing its defense. "Look at my eyes." He lowered his head to stare at her, leaning close to her ear to whisper, looking very much like hypnosis. "You just need to remember, the one you like is me, eyes like this. That is enough." Nina looked into his pitch-black pupils. They were like a pool of unmelting ink, deeply sucking her in. Her remaining rationality was stripped away. Following his words, she nodded in default. "Say you love me." His thumb brushed over her lips parted. "I love you," he smiled with satisfaction. The next afternoon, Nina received a call from Mrs. Evans. She asked if Nina had time in the evening to come home with Evan for a meal. Nina agreed on the phone. Being familiar this time and prepared in advance, she brought some gifts along. Evan came to pick her up on time. Seeing he was still driving this car, Nina couldn't help asking, "Does your brother not need the car?" He seemed to pause for a second before saying, "This car has been given to me to drive." Nina nodded. Once on the road, she made conversation. "You grew up with your brother. He must treat you very well normally, right?" He drove silently, seemingly not wanting to say much. She, however, had a growing curiosity. "Is your brother coming home today?" "Don't know." She found it strange. "Aren't you in the same company?" His face was indifferent. Nina suddenly felt she might have asked something she shouldn't. Her heart felt baffled. Could there be a conflict between the two? Arriving at the Evans house, upon entering, only Mr. and Mrs. Evans and the servants cooking and cleaning were seen, no one else. Nina offered the gifts she brought with both hands. The two elders accepted them with smiles and stuffed some monetary gifts back to her. Nina refused and didn't dare accept until the man beside her mentioned, "Your family, no need to be polite." Only then did she awkwardly accept. At dinner time, the four sat around the table. Nina ate quietly, listening to father and son discuss company matters from shares and authority to project cooperation. At first, she listened casually without thinking much, but gradually she sensed something unusual. Whether it was business or private matters, they seemed to have forgotten one person: Evan's brother, Ethan. Logically speaking, even if this brother didn't participate in managing the company, it was impossible for him to have no presence at home. She harbored doubts in her heart, secretly observing Mrs. Evans during the meal. She saw the woman eating silently, not interjecting in the father and son's conversation, looking unconcerned. However, occasionally considering Nina's feelings, looking up to see her silent, she would urge her to pick up food and eat more. Nina smiled politely and lowered her head to shovel rice. The man beside her finished talking for a moment. Turning his head and seeing she had been eating only the dish in front of her, he extended his long arm to pick dishes for her one by one, saying, "Eat more. You haven't eaten properly these days." Soon, a small mountain piled up in her bowl. Embarrassed to pick it back out in front of the elders, she braced herself and finished eating. After the meal, father and son went to the side hall to talk. Nina consciously helped the servant clear the dishes. Seeing her practiced hands, Mrs. Evans knew she was used to doing this at home, so she stopped her. "Don't busy yourself, they will clean up. Why don't you help me make tea?" Nina agreed and followed Mrs. Evans to the tea cabinet. Following her instructions, she picked one of the canisters, pinched a few tea leaves into the cup, and poured in boiling water. During this, seeing the quiet atmosphere, she made conversation. "Is the older brother not coming back today?" The tea leaves tumbled, soaking and unfurling. Mrs. Evans seemed to just snap back to reality. "Oh, he has business outside." Hearing her tone, Nina felt even more that the relationship between this older brother and the family was subtle. Probably there were bad memories. Otherwise, why did it feel like they were deliberately avoiding talking about him? But if it was as she thought, it likely happened before she came to this family. Since she hadn't been part of it, she wouldn't meddle by asking blindly. She thought through it internally and delivered the tea to the coffee table in the side hall. Mrs. Evans followed and said to Evan, "Since you both have tomorrow off, why don't you two stay here tonight?" He didn't speak. His gaze turned to Nina. Nina hadn't brought anything. She looked back awkwardly, still wanting to hear his opinion. He received her inner thoughts and said, "Go up with Mom." "To my room." Nina nodded, immediately following Mrs. Evans upstairs. There were only 2 bedrooms on the second floor, one on the left and one on the right, presumably belonging to the 2 brothers. Mrs. Evans led her to the room on the right, pushed open the door, turned on the light, and said, "Sleep here tonight." Nina followed her inside. The space was large, half bedroom and half study, plus a bathroom and walk-in closet. Although he didn't return often, every nook and cranny was cleaned spotless. Mrs. Evans asked casually out of concern, "Usually you do the cleaning at home, right?" Nina smiled. "He cleans too. He wasn't this diligent before." "Yes." Mrs. Evans nodded, muttering, "One diligent, one lazy." Nina didn't understand. "Hm." Mrs. Evans turned her head to glance at her. "Oh, I mean the 2 brothers. Before, both were lazy, now the older brother is diligent." Nina still didn't understand, asking with a light laugh, "Is Ethan the diligent one?" Mrs. Evans seemed not to have turned the corner mentally. She was dazed for a moment before saying, "Look at me. The brothers look too alike. Sometimes I speak wrongly too. Reversed. It's the younger brother who is diligent." Nina let out a laugh. Looking around the desk, she asked, "Is there a photo album of the brothers? I want to see if I can tell them apart." Mrs. Evans rummaged through drawers to look. She seemed to have forgotten where it was momentarily and couldn't find it. However, Nina looked around and glimpsed a thick album in the glass cabinet of the bookshelf. It looked like a photo album. She walked over, took it down, opened it, and sure enough it was. She said happily, "I found it." Mrs. Evans walked over to take a look and said, "That's the one." Nina sat down at the desk, flipping through it page by page with great interest. Starting from when the brothers were infants, she asked Mrs. Evans which was the older brother and which was the younger. At first, it wasn't easy to distinguish. By middle school, one of them had a slightly longer hairstyle, looking a bit flamboyant and eye-catching. Nina guessed. "This is Ethan, right?" Mrs. Evans said. "That is Evan." Oh, Nina was wrong. She thought Evan was the steady and introverted type. She didn't expect him to have an emo phase in his youth. The brothers were the same height, so no distinction could be made there. But as the temperament of the teenagers gradually evolved, subtle contrasts emerged. One face was often brimming with smiles, the other was relatively calm and austere. Flipping to the end, the age was relatively close to the present. Reasoning based on previous confirmations, the one with the lack of expression should be Ethan. But looking at the photos and matching them to her inner thoughts, her first feeling was that it was Evan. This man who slept in the same bed as her every day, whether in gestures or the look in his eyes, could she still be mistaken at this moment? But the answer was ultimately the opposite. It was an award photo. The watermark in the bottom right corner clearly read ETHAN-EVANS. Nina blinked, confirming she hadn't seen wrong. In an instant, all established thoughts were overturned. It was as if, following reliable premises, she was extremely close to the correct answer, only to be clubbed on the head and told it was wrong, utterly devoid of reason. Closing the album, Nina went to shower. The hot water pouring over her body felt incredibly freeing, but her mind remained stuck on that matter. Suddenly, she gradually understood. During the initial period of dating Evan, he was indeed sunnier and more extroverted, liked cycling and jogging, and actively teased her in conversation full of sporty vibes. She didn't know when it started, but he wasn't as talkative as before. His clothes leaned towards formal suits. He didn't like discussing sports, and there were more reports that were boring to her. All this wasn't glaringly abrupt, but if it had formed naturally, she felt it was inexplicable. It seemed she had been getting along with two completely different people all along. This thought became even more persuasive after seeing the photos, so much so that unknowingly, she suddenly developed a panic of uncertainty. It was too stuffy in the bathroom. Nina felt she couldn't breathe. She quickly turned off the water, wrapped herself in a bathrobe, and walked out, her hand trembling slightly as she tied the belt. She stood by the sink for a while, hands supporting the edge, looking at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale. She stared blankly at her reflection as a certain thought expanded intensely in an instant. When she walked out of the bathroom, she happened to run into Evan returning to the room. He looked somewhat tired, clutching some documents in his hand. Seeing she had finished showering, he hooked his lips. That fast, Nina looked at his face and nodded. He tossed the documents onto the desk, turned around, and hugged her tightly. Lowering his head to inhale the fresh scent of her bath, he said intoxicatedly, "Smells good." Nina struggled slightly and said, "You hurry and go wash too." He let go of her, pulling back a little distance. His eyes looked at her with a smile. Then, one hand went to his collar and pinched. Without movement, he instructed her, "Unbutton it for me." Nina raised both hands to undo the first button for him. Whether it was too tight or her hands were shaking, she didn't succeed for a good while. He smiled, held her hands to put them down, and undid it himself with ease. The first button was loose. He picked up her hands again, lifting his chin to signal her to continue. She was watched by him the whole time. She didn't dare look back, focusing on undoing the buttons, her brain already a messy paste. Finally finishing the last button, he kissed her forehead as a reward. "Wait for me in bed." Nina didn't move. She watched him walk toward the bathroom behind her. Before entering, he turned back to the desk as if forgetting something and put the documents into the drawer. Blurred sounds of water came from the bathroom. Nina lay on the bed, still wearing the bathrobe. She had no clothes here, so she could only make do like this for now. Her gaze stared blankly at a spot. It had lasted for a long time. There was a thought in her heart, wanting to go up and verify, but afraid to overturn that answer she persisted in yet again. Caught in a dilemma, the water sound next door stopped, and her heart seemed to skip a beat. Time was running out. As if waking from a dream, she jumped off the bed, ran barefoot to the desk, and pulled open the drawer she had been staring at for a long time. Inside was the document just placed there. The room was very quiet. Water sounds still trickled from the bathroom. The person inside should be drying off. Nina's hands trembled slightly. She quickly pinched the document, flipped to the last page, and fixed her eyes on the last line. A signature in black ink already existed there, Ethan Evans. And at that very moment, the bathroom door opened, and the man who had just finished showering walked out. Chapter 6. Hearing the door open, Nina was greatly startled. She quickly put down the document in her hand, simultaneously turning to look behind her at the person suddenly standing in the doorway. He washed faster than expected, and one could see it was hurried. His hair was still wet. His right hand grasped a towel, rubbing his head as it tilted. A few strands of black hair fell across his forehead. His eyes, smoked by the misty vapor, were dark and bright, staring coldly at her actions. Nina stood there, mouth agape, forgetting to move for a moment. She scanned him hurriedly up and down. He was bare-chested, drops of water falling from the tips of his hair onto his heaving chest, following the smooth lines of his abdominal muscles down, disappearing into the towel casually wrapped around his waist. Usually at home, he often came out of the bath in this posture. Nina had feasted her eyes on his body plenty of times, but this time was different from the past. Her mind was cluttered with diverse thoughts. An unknown bitterness stuck in her throat, unable to come out. Receiving such an impact now, her heart felt all sorts of flavors. Seeing her blank gaze and slightly solemn face, he stood rubbing his hair a few more times, gathered the towel, threw it over his shoulder, and walked straight toward her. Stopping by the table, his gaze glanced at the closed document in her hand. Curving his lips, he said, interested in the company's project proposal. He asked very pleasantly, as if unaware of her thoughts, but Nina saw not a trace of a smile in his eyes. "This isn't yours, is it?" She took a deep breath, lifting it with effort, and simply flipped the document directly to the last page. The black signature on white paper fell into both their eyes. He looked at her for a good while first, seemingly judging her thoughts, before looking down to glance at the signature. Unhurriedly, he said, "You've seen the name already. You're asking me whose it is?" By the end, there was a tone of faint, mocking questioning. Nina couldn't tell if he was playing dumb. She asked further, "Why is Ethan Evans's signed document with you?" He let her look at his calm face. One hand naturally wrapped around her shoulder, the other took the document from her hand and closed it. Shaking his head as if helpless, he smiled. "There are so many documents in the company. When busy, handing over to each other is inevitable just going through the process. Why do you ask this?" Nina was stumped by his question. Suddenly, she felt silly for asking, wishfully taking her own thoughts as the leading opinion. But that uncomfortable feeling in her heart remained strong. It didn't dissipate just because she couldn't spot a flaw in his face. Especially when surrounded by his aura, she even generated an unprecedented sense of unfamiliarity in a flash. This duplicitous alienation made him hard to fathom or guess. It was also at that moment she truly determined. This man in front of her was hiding something, and this matter, regarding her, was deeply concealed. "Nothing, I was just curious," she could only explain. The document in her hand had been taken away, placed back in the drawer, and closed, as if nothing had happened, even though she had glanced at it. "If you're interested in the project, I can give you a proper introduction another day." His flat tone sounded like chatting about the weather. He let go of her and continued drying his hair, but one could hear he was changing the subject for the inexplicable little interlude. Nina felt uneasy inside. She didn't know what to do holding her phone. Closing her eyes to calm down, she quickly reorganized all the suspicious points, then sent a message to a colleague on duty at the hospital. Waiting for a few minutes, the other side returned a mobile number. It was exactly the one she had dialed during the day. She tapped on that string of numbers. It immediately showed dialing. Placing the phone to her ear, she only heard a busy tone coming from the other end. No one answered. She put down the phone without hanging up, lying prone and straining her ears to listen to every corner of the room. Not the slightest ringtone. Did she really think wrong? Just as she was suspicious, the bathroom door opened and sounds of movement came out. Nina didn't see him yet. She cut the connecting call, put the phone on the nightstand, lay down under the quilt herself, and turned sideways to pretend to sleep. After a moment, footsteps approached, stopping on the other side of the bed. She breathed shallowly. Even with her eyes closed, her mind was unsettled. He lay down, moved over from behind, grabbed her shoulder, and asked, "Sleeping just like that?" She didn't answer, moving slightly, pretending to be sleepy. He pulled at her collar and said, "Take it off. It's damp." Nina still didn't make a sound. She was struggling with how to face him. He, however, didn't say a second word. His hand went directly to her waist to untie the belt for her. Her consciousness panicked. She pushed his hand to resist. He paused his movement. Afraid of making the atmosphere stiff, she explained, "If I take it off, I have nothing to wear." He said, "This is our room, you can wear nothing." She stared into the void. Being thin-skinned, she had never been this awkward even at home. Just as she hesitated, he had already untied the belt involuntarily, forcefully dragging her bathrobe off within the quilt. Instantly, she was like a peeled dumpling. Dragging the quilt to wrap herself tightly, she said, "Then just give me any piece of clothing to wear." Not knowing if he heard, he threw the bathrobe far onto the floor, then tore off the covering at his own waist too. Pulling open the thin quilt, he approached her and said, "Why wear anything to sleep? Completely unnecessary." His words had a strong purpose. Hearing them, her face stiffened. She used her knee to prop against his body, pressing over, pleading weakly, "I'm not feeling well today. Can we just sleep?" "No." He stared at her face and refused. She looked up. The room lighting was half bright, half dim. His eyes held not half a trace of tenderness. Instead, they were filled with intense desire for control. She felt apprehensive, hurriedly avoiding his gaze, only burrowing herself into the quilt. "Do you not consider my feelings at all now? Then have you considered my feelings?" He took advantage of her relaxed moment to squeeze in unreasonably. Nina was stunned, turning her face to him. "Where did I not consider you? Do you have me in your heart right now?" He revealed his dissatisfaction very clearly, looking at her forcefully from above. "From the moment I came, you keep thinking about someone else. Are you starting to despise me?" She opened her mouth, unable to speak at first. Pausing for a few seconds, she finally spoke. "You're psycho." "Then I'll go a little psycho now." He used the momentum to exert force, grabbing her shoulder blades and pinning her down firmly. Nina couldn't break free. She wanted to lift her leg to resist, but she was completely suppressed by him, unable to move an inch. "You want to force me?" she asked with red eyes. He lowered his head, blowing air by her ear, extending to her collarbone, then looked up at her again, his eyes cold. "We are husband and wife. Does this count as me forcing you?" Husband and wife, her head buzzed. Reminded by him, she thought of something and said quickly, "Let's go home now, okay?" "Why go back?" "The windows at home aren't closed. I'm worried." The excuse was conceived too hastily, even she felt it was clumsy after saying it. He dismissed her with one sentence, "I went back. The windows are all closed." She really couldn't stay. Softening her tone, she begged again, "I can't sleep here, I want to go back." He ignored her, turning a deaf ear. Her heart tightened. She tried calling him tentatively, "Evan!" "Shut up." It was the first time he interrupted her so coldly, making her freeze in place, looking at him as if seeing a stranger. The answer in her heart flickered in and out, lacking only a breakthrough for verification. His face was cold, eager to break through her moment of distraction. The final tone sounded like negotiation, but she clearly knew it was mostly perfunctory. Nina's head was truly a mess. On one side was the unspeakable suspicion of him. On the other was physical release. Both thoughts occupied her, about to burst her apart. But not long after, the latter took precedence. She closed her eyes, simply disregarding everything, treating it as a cultivation practice. Perhaps she should rejoice that he was quite skilled with her, only that at critical moments, his attitude was tough, leaving her no power to fight back. It turned out he hadn't forgotten what he said. He was deliberately using this method to punish her. A trace of despair flooded Nina's heart. Yet the person behind her remained awake for a long time. Waking up the next day, before even opening her eyes, Nina felt her body weighed down by 1,000 pounds. Memories of last night revived. She took a deep breath. An arm lay across her waist. She was held uncomfortably tight. She used her hand to pry it open, but instead was held tighter. "Sleep a bit longer." He refused to be rejected. To prevent him from having unrestrained thoughts again, she shrugged her shoulders hard to push him. "I need to use the bathroom." Thinking he would still pester her, surprisingly, he rolled over to the other side and let go. Gaining free space, Nina's heart relaxed a bit. She immediately pulled off the quilt. A chill hit her body. She was wearing nothing. As soon as her feet hit the floor, she hugged her arms, ready to find clothes. Inadvertently looking up, she bumped into the man lying flat on the bed, staring at her with open eyes full of red blood vessels. Her face flushed with embarrassment, but she had no choice. She fled to the bathroom, her clothes were all there. Upon entering, she dressed quickly. Gradually remembering just now, it felt somewhat like fleeing in defeat. What was wrong with her? She already suspected him, yet went to bed with him. But what could be done? They were already married. Thinking of this point, she covered her face and sighed again. Turning on the tap, she scooped cold water to splash on her face, telling herself secretly to stay awake. After tidying up and going out, he had gotten up too. Saying nothing, he passed her and entered the bathroom. Nina looked up to glance at him, seeing the red blood vessels in his eyes again. Had he not slept all night? The door closed behind her. She looked at the messy bed, went over to grab the quilt, shook it flat, and patted it until there wasn't a single wrinkle before stopping. Then she turned her head and saw the phone on the nightstand on his side. Her heart was stirring, wanting to rush up to find answers. The next moment, obeying her inner thoughts, she went directly up and picked it up. This was the phone he commonly used. Checking the device number, it was the one she already knew well. But she didn't give up. She looked at the various icons on the screen. She clicked through all the apps with identity records one by one. There were no suspicious points. After exiting, she pondered blankly where the problem lay, but noticed the WhatsApp icon in the corner. She hadn't clicked it just now because she simply didn't think there was a problem there. But after clicking it and seeing the few contacts inside, she immediately became suspicious. Although she didn't know his circle, from the daily chats Evan had before, she knew he made many friends. It couldn't be just these countable contacts. The most recent chat object at the top was herself. Opening the log, it was conversations familiar to her. Scrolling down, it was basically insignificant people without specific contact names, as if glossing things over. A detail she remembered was that the woman who sent him the ambiguous message last time inexplicably didn't appear in the contact list either. Her hand trembled. Not knowing how, she flipped to the settings and clicked Switch Account. 2 account avatars popped up on the page. One was the currently logged-in one, while the other was labeled with a mobile number. The first few digits displayed, Nina recalled and took her own phone, clicking on the number she dialed last night. The visible digits basically overlapped. Mrs. Evans had prepared breakfast. They ate at the house. The atmosphere was calm, just like last night. Nina even wiped her mouth silently and smiled, waiting for him after finishing early. When he finished, she didn't say she wanted to leave, but he brought up having business to attend to and bid farewell to Mrs. Evans. Nina naturally followed him, waving goodbye to Mrs. Evans too. On the way back, neither spoke inside the car. The car radio was on. An off-key stand-up comedy broadcast came out, reconciling the atmosphere. Nina's gaze kept looking out the window. Just as they were about to pass a drugstore, she shouted, "Stop for a second." He glanced over, ignoring it completely. Seeing the drugstore sign flash by, she turned back to look at him anxiously. "I told you to stop." He spat out 3 words coldly. "You're not taking that." Chapter 7, traffic was heavy in the morning, horns honking all around. His warning was drowned out by the noise of the traffic, but Nina heard it clearly. Coincidentally, a red light appeared ahead, and the car naturally slowed to a stop. She didn't pay him any more attention and tried to open the door herself. She pushed several times, but it wouldn't budge. She turned back and, forcing calmness, told him, "I want to get out." He didn't look at her, staring straight ahead, equally cold and composed. "Do you think this is a place to get out?" To the right was a guardrail, beyond which was the non-motorized lane where several electric scooters sped by. But at this moment, she didn't care about any of that. She just wanted to get out quickly and take some preventive measures. Clearly, he saw her intent and wasn't giving her the chance. Panic rose in her heart. She remembered his forceful demands last night and realized belatedly that this was all part of his plan. Time ticked by. At some point, the car windows were fully rolled up, making the space cramped and unbearable. Nina's chest heaved, a genuine sense of grievance refusing to settle. She didn't speak, and he certainly wouldn't open his mouth. Although she didn't look over, she could guess his expression wasn't good. Since getting up this morning, he had been icy, chilling people to the bone. Right, this seemed to be his true nature. The Evan of the past wasn't like this. When they first met, he was positive, optimistic, and full of energy. How could those shining points be obliterated in such a short time? But the more she thought this way, the more she felt a sense of guilt beyond redemption. Carrying this feeling all the way, they returned to their residence. He parked the car underground. Clearly, he wouldn't be going out again. Nina pushed the door open and got out. Without waiting for him, she walked straight towards the elevator. She had only taken a few steps when she heard the sound of a car door slamming behind her. His footsteps followed closely. Arriving at the elevator lobby, she was a step late. Someone had just taken it. She would have to wait at least a minute. Within this minute, he caught up. Out of the corner of her eye, Nina saw him approach and stand shoulder to shoulder with her. Being close, she felt breathless and stepped slightly to the left. He noticed this subtle movement. Seeming dissatisfied, his long arm reached out and dragged her back, looking at her with a dark expression. "What are you dodging?" The next moment, he smoothly wrapped his arm around her shoulder, forcing her into an intimate posture. Nina didn't want to be forced. She tried to step away with larger strides. Just then, the door opened. She was dragged inside by him, pressed directly against the elevator wall. He pressed the button quickly with one hand, and the door closed behind them. The space was enclosed. He stepped back slightly, turning sideways, eyeing her coldly again. Nina stood in the corner, taking deep breaths, keeping a straight face as she looked up at him, lips pressed tight. They confronted each other coldly, like the calm before a storm. Soon, waiting for the door to open, Nina rushed out first. She punched in the door code, pulled it open quickly, and without even taking off her shoes, ran straight to the bedroom. In the bottom drawer of the nightstand lay the marriage certificates they had just obtained not long ago. When she first got them, she had looked at them many times and never felt anything was wrong. If even this could be a lie, she didn't know what else she could believe. Taking them out again, she flipped one open impatiently. The name was correct. The date of birth was also correct. The only thing was the ID number, which she had no place to verify. Just as she was at a loss, someone spoke from behind. "See anything?" The tone was calm, as if watching a play. She turned slowly. He was standing by the door, watching the booklet in her hand. Nina wanted to stand up, but felt her legs go weak. It felt as if a hole was being torn in her heart. She wanted a clear answer immediately. "Who exactly are you?" she asked, her breath uneven. He stared at her for a long while without answering, then walked over and handed her a card. It was an ID card. Identical face, but the name read Ethan Evans. Her heart went cold instantly. She checked the last digits of the ID number. They differed by one digit from the one on the marriage certificate. She regained a bit of strength, clutching the marriage certificate tightly as if holding onto the last thread of hope. Supporting herself on the bed, she stood up shakily, staring at his face to demand, "Where is Evan?" "Now you know to ask." He looked at her with ironic mockery. A rush of gloom hit the top of Nina's head. Also wary of his unpredictable mood, she forcibly suppressed her outburst, clenching her fists, asking again, "Where is he?" "He's dead." The air suddenly went dead silent. "He died half a month ago," he reiterated emotionlessly. "Congenital heart disease attack. The medical record you saw last time was his." All sounds ceased, and her breath was sucked away in an instant. She widened her eyes, shaking her head in disbelief. Slowly, her gaze became unfocused, moving from his face to elsewhere, becoming dull and slow. As if struck by a heavy blow, her legs gave way, and she collapsed softly to the floor. After a good while, all senses gradually returned. A numb pain came from her knees, her eyes blurred, filling with liquid. She let out a heavy breath, followed by continuous, heart-wrenching pangs of pain. The man in front of her squatted down, reaching out to wipe her face, whispering, "Don't cry in front of me. At least don't let me see it." She slapped his hand away, turning sideways to avoid him, her voice choked with sobs and gritted teeth full of hate. "You liar," he didn't deny it. "Besides a liar, I am also your man by law." Nina let out a cold laugh. "Law? Do you really think we have the title of husband and wife?" She waved the marriage certificate in her hand to remind him. "The one I married is Evan, not you." Her firm tone seemed to anger him. Then, he said a sentence sarcastically that completely shattered her last shred of conviction. "Is that so? You should take another good look at whether that marriage certificate in your hand is real or fake." Her brain exploded. Nina thought he was joking. The booklet was right in her hand. How could it be fake? But she couldn't help feeling guilty. She opened it to look again, finding nothing. He had already stood up. Giving no hints, he turned and walked out of the bedroom. Nina's head was spinning. Trapped by his sentence with no exit found, wanting reason to refute, she quickly got up and followed him to the study. He was standing by a row of bookshelves. Not knowing where he had just pulled them from, he held two red booklets in his hand, similar to the one Nina held. The bright red color stung her eyes. She walked closer slowly, staring straight at the booklets in his hand, speechless. If you really can't tell, why not refer to what the real ones look like? After speaking, he cruelly flipped one open and spread it before her eyes. Nina blinked. The world seemed to turn upside down, everything felt like an illusion. The certificate holder in his hand was Ethan Evans. The photo was undoubtedly taken together back then. Aside from the ID number differing due to the person, the most controversial part was the marriage certificate serial number. Asking herself honestly, she had only registered once. How could she have obtained marriage certificates twice with different people? It only meant one of them was fake. Hard to distinguish real from fake. A check with the notary agency would reveal it. But at this moment, she couldn't stick to her own view anymore. His glaring confidence was right before her eyes, and clearly, she had long been ensnared in the trap he set, thinking she married the person she liked, only to be thoroughly deceived by an identical face. She was ashamed and indignant. "You committed marriage fraud. I can sue you." There was no fear on his face, even a slight raising of one corner of his mouth. "Before suing me, you might want to think about your wording. Why would I do this?" Nina paused, silent. "You and I are the legal couple, yet you got a fake certificate with my brother. If you slam this booklet down in court, who do you think has more standing to sue? Whose story has more objectivity? Yours. Or mine?" Nina hadn't expected him to have such sophistry. It was also at this moment she clearly saw his true face. How could he be Evan? She must have been blind before to be kept in the dark all along. Not only deceived by him, but also by his family and the various details he deliberately disguised and hid. Only the truth will surface eventually. Blame it on her discovering it too late. At this moment, she was his wife in name, unable to refute. Thinking back to when she went with him to get the license, everything went smoothly that day, and there were no slip-ups in the intermediate steps. Plus, this photo was completely authentic. She still hadn't figured it out even now. Lifting the one in her hand, she asked him, "Where did this come from?" He didn't answer directly, his tone tough. "Wherever it came from, it was just to coax you to be happy. Now that you know it's fake, forget him. From the day we got the license, you have been Ethan Evans's wife. I hope you recognize the facts and stop thinking about a person who no longer exists." Nina sneered. "Coax me to be happy. You clearly prepared in advance to trick me into marriage. You had your people at City Hall, so you conspired inside and out to fool me together, is that it? Whether it is or not, is there any room for remedy now?" Saying that, he snatched the marriage certificate from her hand, stacked the two flat, and looked up at her. "I still want to live a good life with you, so from this moment on, this thing should not appear between us again." As his words fell, a flash of ruthlessness passed through his eyes. Before Nina could fully process it, she saw the two marriage certificates bearing Evans and her signatures being torn in half, then into quarters by his hands, until they became a pile of scraps. She felt her heart being torn into fragments in that instant too, thrown into the trash can along with those pieces of paper. That marriage certificate she once cherished was now discarded like a worn-out shoe. Bright light spilled into the room from the window. There was no wind. The warm sun shone obliquely, yet it made her feel exceptionally cold. For a long time, she stood in the study, her face drained of color, asking hoarsely, "Why did you do this?" "Because you can't marry anyone else," he said. Chapter 8. For the entire morning, Nina locked herself in the bedroom, barring anyone from entering. She didn't know what to do, she just didn't want to stay in the same space as him. Seeing that face made her heart feel ashamed and pained. She leaned against the bay window, dazing. When her emotions calmed down and she faced the reality that Evan was gone, she couldn't help but weep with grief. Memories of the past came rushing back. Then she suddenly remembered the argument she had with Ethan in the study earlier. Unable to hold back, she had screamed at him, "What does it matter to you who I marry?" He acted unusually calm, as if believing his words were truth itself. "Of course it matters, if you knew what Evan's dying wish was." She froze and asked him, "What?" "He was preparing to propose to you, but he didn't want you to watch him die. He asked me to pass the ring to you." She was stunned for a long while, digesting his words completely, then laughed coldly. "So you could take it upon yourself to impersonate him and trick me into marriage?" No wonder he suddenly took her to meet the parents that day. Everything was arranged in advance. Those speeches, those smiles, thinking back now, they were terribly fake. Think what you want. He didn't seem to want to explain much. Haven't you been living quite happily all these days? Isn't the one you like exactly this face, claiming you love me? I didn't let you be heartbroken. That was Evan's wish, and I consider it fulfilled. She exploded on the spot, grabbing a thick book at hand and throwing it at him. You are simply a bastard. The book wasn't thrown accurately. It only hit his shoulder and flopped onto the floor. His figure swayed slightly, unhurried. Bastard or not, you let me sleep with you. Seeing he was unreasonable, she slammed the door and left. He followed her out, watched her enter the bedroom, and didn't bother her further. Nina waited until the tears on her face made her skin sting before she couldn't resist going out to wash her face. She ran into him sitting on the living room sofa, looking up at her expressionlessly, then continuing to operate his laptop. Not even staying in the study anymore was he specifically monitoring her. Nina gave a secret humph and returned to the room to lock the door again. Closing the door, shutting out everything behind her, her heart felt uncomfortably empty. Looking at every corner of this room, where were there any things belonging to Evan? All she could recall was the status and emotions stripped and occupied by another. Leaning back with her head up for a while, she suddenly remembered something and walked to the bedside cabinet to squat down. In the spot where the marriage certificate used to be, a ring still lay. Taking it out, she carefully opened the box. A flash of silver shimmered in the dim light. She stroked it gently. This counted as the only thing Evan left her. Putting it on her ring finger, the size fit perfectly. From now on, she would wear it on her hand so her heart could find a trace of comfort. Dazing for another moment, she remembered what she wanted to do. She walked to the wardrobe, pulled open the door, dragged out a suitcase, and threw all of her visible clothes into it. Before she had packed much, the bedroom door opened suddenly. Nina turned her head. Ethan stood at the door. The spare key was inserted in the lock. She wasn't surprised. Disregarding his expression, she continued organizing on her own. Where do you think you're going? He pushed the door open. Using some force, the bottom edge of the door hit the wall stopper. She still planned to save her energy for moving things and didn't want to fight with him. Anywhere but here, he went against her. Except here, you're not going anywhere. Nina stopped her hands, protecting the suitcase. Why can't I leave? I married you. I didn't give you my personal freedom too. He walked to the side, looked down at the things in the suitcase, looked at her and said, You can have personal freedom. I allow you to go out to work, but you must come home to sleep at night. After speaking, he reached out and flipped the suitcase lid closed. Nina reopened it right in front of him. I want to go out for fresh air. Can't I? He stubbornly blocked her way. If you want fresh air, fine. I'm going on a business trip tomorrow. Take leave and come with me. Suppressed anger filled Nina's chest. After several rounds of confrontation with him, she knew this person wasn't easy to talk to, but she wasn't willing to satisfy him just like that. She simply decided to make him unhappy too. Fine, then I won't pack. I don't want anything. Keep it all and throw it away yourself. After speaking, she looked around, grabbed her bag and phone, turned and walked away. Her wrist was grabbed. He turned his head to stare at her. What do you mean? She declared decisively. Divorce, don't think about it. He replied lightly with fearlessness and disdain. Do you think I'll agree? Why bother? She tried to break free but was held tighter by him. She looked at him mockingly. What kind of woman couldn't you get? Coveting your own brother's girlfriend, aren't you afraid of losing face if word gets out? If you really can't find anyone, I'd be happy to help you. As soon as Nina finished speaking, she felt she had angered him. Pain came from her arm being tightly bound. She couldn't help pushing his hand, shouting, Let go of me. He finally released her but pushed her back. Not much force used. Nina only stumbled back a step. Just as she stood firm, she saw him turn and walk out. Pausing at the door, without looking back, he said, I'm traveling for a week starting tomorrow. Leaving you these days to calm down. I advise you to cause less trouble. You have to live this life whether you want to or not. Nina thought he had left the house. When she reached the living room, she found him still there, seemingly waiting. Seeing her, he said, Go out to eat. She glanced at the wall clock. It was past noon. She was already full of anger. How could she eat? I don't want to eat. She passed him and walked directly to the door. He caught up and grabbed her hand, holding it firmly until he released it inside the elevator. As soon as they separated, she moved far away, crossing her arms to prevent him from touching. He let his gaze fall on her ring finger, mocking lightly, "Hid it before, now you can bear to wear it?" She deliberately flashed a smile at him that would make others envious. "Because Evan gave it to me. I'm going to wear it for life, and you can't control that." He didn't speak, withdrawing his gaze, his face gloomy. Nina pressed the button for the first floor. When the door opened and she prepared to exit, she was dragged backward by him with great force. He quickly pressed B1 and closed the door. She was surprised and anxious. "What are you doing?" "Taking you somewhere," he said calmly. She wouldn't comply. "You can't control me," he sneered. "Going to see him. You don't want to." Nina fell silent, quieting down. The elevator door opened again. He walked out first. She hesitated for a moment, then followed silently. The car got on the road and stopped by the street after a few minutes. Nina grabbed the door handle, turning to look at him in confusion. "Eat first. After eating, I'll take you to see him." He slammed the door and got out, giving no chance to speak. Nina had no choice but to endure temporarily. Not wanting to punish her own stomach, she followed him into a nearby restaurant. Entering and finding a seat, Ethan ordered directly, then instructed the waiter to bring 2 glasses of water. The water arrived, placed in front of them. He picked it up, took a sip, and said as he put it down, "If you want to fight with me, you need energy. Looking half dead ruins my appetite." Nina ignored him, turning her gaze out the window. After a while, the dishes were served one by one. She only used her chopsticks to shovel rice. Anything he touched, she barely ate. Ethan noticed, his face sinking. He put down his chopsticks and asked, "Is it poisoned?" She didn't speak. Assuming he wouldn't do anything to her in public, she just focused on filling her stomach quickly. He stopped eating completely, just sitting opposite watching her eat. Seeing this, she didn't persuade him. If he retreated, she advanced. Seeing a table full of food, just 2 people ordered 6 dishes, she couldn't bear the waste, so she simply took a little of everything. But one person couldn't finish it all. While waiting to pull a tissue to wipe her mouth, she looked up at him and realized she had fallen into his trap. She had eaten almost the entire table of food alone. Wasn't this just satisfying his wish, not letting him lose his appetite? Thinking and thinking, she got angry at herself, slammed the tissue on the table, and stood up abruptly. Ethan hadn't eaten much, but his mood was considerably better. He called the waiter to pay the bill and said to her, "Seems your appetite is good." Nina turned and walked out. The afternoon sun was bright. She couldn't get in the car and had to wait for him specifically. In her heart, she thought, is it worth it? Being tricked into marriage by him, argued with him, yet now eating at the same table, riding in the same car. What is this? But she knew it was to see Evan. How he was when he left, what he was thinking at the time, she knew absolutely nothing. She desperately wanted to see him once, to know where he was, to rely on another person. A moment later, Ethan came up from behind, passed her, and got into the car directly. Nina took a few steps to follow. It took half an hour to get to the cemetery. The moment she arrived, she found it hard to move an inch. A perfectly fine person, clearly looking so healthy, yet he never mentioned his condition to her, nor let her see him one last time. Seeing him again, he was already in the ground. Tears blurred her vision, sorrow came from her heart. Her hand was held. The person beside her grabbed her without a word, leading her inside. Nina didn't act awkward this time, because she really lacked the courage to move forward. Only with someone guiding her did her legs not give way. Evan's grave was very new. The inscription on it was clear and legible, from the name to the dates of birth and death, as well as his smiling face. There were some wreaths left on the ground, seemingly from not long ago. At this moment, she finally couldn't suppress it, crouching on the ground and crying out loud. And the man standing beside her, with a face 100 similar to the photo on the tombstone, had a solemn and quiet expression, standing tall, also gazing at the person in the photo. Aside from that, there was no further display of emotion. In the past, he was his brother. From now on, he was her husband. Returning that day, Nina went to work at the hospital early, avoiding the suffocation of staying with him. Ethan knew her work schedule and didn't stop her. Seeing she was no longer packing luggage, he let her be. Nina changed her mood at the hospital. The environment there was chaotic and noisy. In the face of life, death, injury, and illness, everything else was a small matter. She had no time to think about annoying trifles, intentionally letting work numb her into forgetting temporarily. Returning home early the next morning, she didn't take the elevator. She deliberately went around the parking lot first. Not seeing his car, she decided to go upstairs home. Entering the door and going to the bedroom, she noticed his suitcase was gone. It seemed he really went on a business trip. She finally had her own space. Idling, she looked around the whole apartment, but suddenly felt clueless about where to start. She genuinely decided to move out, finding her things in every corner of the home. Although she hadn't lived there long, she brought a little something out every time she returned to the Norris home during those days. Plus, he occasionally gave her things to add. Discarding those aside, what remained ultimately wasn't something she could take away in one box. How relaxed and comfortable it was back then, how heavy and burdensome it was now. She really wanted to just go home empty-handed, care about nothing, and be her parents' daughter again. How good that would be. But obviously not, so she didn't dare tell her parents what she had encountered. The morning passed. She wasn't impatient or disorganized. Since he wouldn't be back for a few days anyway, she still had time to arrange things. While dazing, she received a phone call. She picked it up to see it was Mrs. Evans asking to meet her. Nina didn't think much of it. Coincidentally, she also had questions to ask. She might as well start from them to make this marriage completely severed. Chapter 9, the place Mrs. Evans arranged wasn't far, located in the shopping plaza nearby. Nina tidied herself up and headed there. After all, the other party was an elder. She didn't wish to vent anger on her. The primary goal was to discuss the relationship with Ethan. She didn't want to be bound for a lifetime in such an unclear manner. She arrived 5 minutes early, finding Mrs. Evans was even earlier, already seated at a reserved table. It seemed she took this appointment very seriously. It was just lunchtime. Mrs. Evans called the waiter and asked what Nina wanted to order. Even though the other party invited her, Nina straightened her back and showed her manners. "Mrs. Evans, let me treat you to this meal." Mrs. Evans looked up at her, seemingly noticing the change in address. Yesterday at the Evans house, she had specifically called her Mom, but as things stood now, she couldn't say it no matter what. To avoid awkwardness, Nina explained, "If you hadn't asked me out, I intended to see you again anyway." Mrs. Evans asked tentatively, "Will it be the last time?" Nina was stumped and didn't answer, but she could hear the other party already knew her thoughts, likely having communicated with Ethan. "Rest assured, I didn't ask you out to persuade you to make up." Mrs. Evans picked up the teapot to pour tea for her. Seeing this, Nina actively moved her cup over, listening as she said, "I just want to chat with you about the two brothers. You wouldn't not want to know, right?" Nina calmed down. "Please speak." Mrs. Evans pointed her finger. "You order first. I'll tell you slowly." Nina had to bury her head in the menu. Not knowing what the other preferred, she spent a long time ticking boxes before handing it over, asking, "Need to add anything else?" Mrs. Evans glanced at it casually and nodded. "This is fine." The waiter took the menu away. Mrs. Evans looked at her again, smiling. "Your taste leans towards light flavors. Usually eating with him, he must accommodate you, right?" Nina listened to these words, secretly guessing who the other party was referring to. Mrs. Evans realized and added, "I mean Ethan. He likes spicy food." Evan was like you, but Ethan specifically imitated Evan's habits in all aspects to disguise himself in front of you. Nina fell silent inwardly, suddenly remembering yesterday. He took her out to eat, and at that time did instruct the waiter to avoid spice. She even thought it was his personal dietary habit. Only later, when things went stiff and he left without eating much, did she wonder if he would fall ill. Thinking of this, she pinched her own palm, forcing herself to recognize reality. She smiled extremely faintly. "Eating less spice is good for the body too." Mrs. Evans agreed. "Your habits are like Evan's. He indeed couldn't eat spicy food. Since birth, the doctor told me his heart wasn't good. For so many years, we were very careful in all aspects and cultivated good living habits in him. Therefore, he looked very healthy, but outsiders didn't know his physical condition was always not too optimistic." Nina condensed her grief, perplexed. "Why did he never mention it to me?" "Maybe he didn't want you to see him in a state without vitality. He was very competitive since childhood, not just him, but Ethan even more so. In the photos you saw at home last time, they seemed to have a good relationship, but actually, as children, they argued often over a toy or an opportunity. They say parents won't favor one child, but in our family, that situation did exist. Because of Evan's physical reasons, we took care of him more often, ignoring Ethan's feelings, and even scolded him for not being sensible. Therefore, later, his personality gradually became cold, and he spoke very little. Comparatively, Evan lived more freely, with an outgoing personality and better popularity. In high school, a girl liked Evan, and Evan had feelings for her too, just that they hadn't gotten together yet. Not knowing out of what psychology, Ethan deliberately disguised himself as Evan to flirt with someone else, then let that girl see it to create a misunderstanding about Evan. At that time, the two had a cold war for a long time. Nina was startled. She hadn't expected the brothers to have such a barrier. She recalled whenever she called him Evan, he often looked unsettled as if the name didn't fit. It turned out behind that lay a profound disguise, sometimes even looking at her with gritted teeth like an enemy torturing, while intentionally letting her fail to call the name right. Only his current temperament seemed completely in line with cause and effect, not surprising at all. But there was one point she still didn't understand. She asked the person opposite, how did Ethan know about me? When dating Evan, she never knew he had a brother, let alone a twin, and Ethan's purpose in approaching her she also found inconceivable. She had never provoked him. Even if she had provoked Evan, logically it wasn't worth his great effort to take revenge on her. Mrs. Evans took a sip of tea, caught her breath, and said, "It was from Evan." Nina was quiet, unable to figure out the reason. After that incident back then, Evan didn't get along well with Ethan. If he liked someone, he tried to hide it from Ethan, including meeting you later. He shouldn't have mentioned Ethan's existence to you, right? Nina nodded. But a few months ago, the brothers' relationship got a little better. Evan even showed us your photo and introduced you. Ethan was present at the time. I noticed his expression. Although I can't say it was firm, there was indeed interest in you too. He's not one to show his inner thoughts on his face, wouldn't before, won't even more now. But as a mother, I could see it. Afterwards, I asked him privately. He only replied with one sentence. "Do you know what it was?" Nina didn't know why, but she didn't dare look the other directly in the eye. Her head lowered gradually, hands clenched into fists, looking uncomfortably at the floor by the table, voice thin as a mosquito. "What did he say?" "He said, 'Don't worry, I won't break them up again.'" What kind of thought was that? Nina couldn't understand. Perhaps it was just a rivalry seeped into the bones gaining a conscience. It couldn't be called true feelings. Mrs. Evans's expression was both sad and sorrowful as she spoke. At that time, we all knew Evan's illness wasn't very stable. In other words, once his emotions weren't controlled well, he could be gone suddenly. On his wrist, he wore a watch case. Inside was his medicine. Nina recalled. She indeed saw Evan taking pills from inside. Asking him curiously back then, he answered they were vitamin tablets, and she didn't suspect. But who expected him to leave so fast? That day they were at the company. Evan suddenly had angina, went to the hospital in the afternoon, and was gone that night. She choked up for a moment, took a deep breath, and continued. Ethan handled all the funeral arrangements. Those few days he was so busy he barely slept. Of course, he also deliberately did one thing, which was using Evan's phone to give you the illusion he was still there. None of us supported his deceptive behavior, but that day outside the emergency room, he knelt in front of us, begging us to approve his method. That was the first time he made a choice so firmly. He said he wanted to replace. Nina saw the waiter approaching out of the corner of her eye and interrupted hurriedly, "Mrs. Evans, the food is here." Mrs. Evans stopped. Waiting for the waiter to finish serving, she wanted to continue, but Nina spoke up. "I know what you want to say. He already explained it to me, but this reason is too absurd. I cannot accept it." Mrs. Evans nodded. "Indeed. You are an honest girl. For you, knowing the truth directly wouldn't be hard to accept. Perhaps much better than now, but have you thought about it? Actually, he is genuinely towards you." Nina didn't wish to listen much. He indeed acted very well. Putting aside his intentions, I felt very happy during this time, but what is fake cannot last forever. Premeditation and calculation cannot maintain a lifetime. Mrs. Evans had nothing left to say. Her intention wasn't really to persuade for reconciliation, just to give her a belated explanation. Her gaze paused and drifted, suddenly sweeping over Nina's ring finger. That gleaming silver band seemed to announce something. She pondered in silence. Nina didn't want the atmosphere to go cold and awkward. She softened her tone. "Thank you for telling me this. I also know he asked you, wanting you to persuade me, but I have already decided to end this wrong relationship with him." "No," Mrs. Evans shook her head. "You thought wrong. I said Ethan isn't a person who talks much. So this matter wasn't told to me by him, but I discovered it yesterday morning." Nina was surprised. "Yesterday," Mrs. Evans said, "although I can't see what you are thinking, I can see through Ethan's mind. I knew there was a problem between you two. Later I called to ask him, and he still denied it to death, so I could only come to find you." Nina clenched her hands tightly, not knowing where to put them. She involuntarily sat up straight, ultimately assuming a tough stance. "I have thought it through. Separating earlier is the best choice, good for everyone." "Is there really no chance?" the person opposite asked with slight regret. Nina didn't speak. She didn't shake her head either. Her hand trembled a bit, as if afraid of being discovered, so she simply picked up her chopsticks to pick up food. Afterwards, she said no more. After parting with Mrs. Evans that day, Nina was restless and distracted for several days. At night, she still slept in their bedroom. Only, she often woke up abruptly from sleep, having the illusion of touching someone lying beside her in the dark. She even felt that person pressing on her, a pair of pitch-black eyes staring at her gloomily, the deep affection in the expression unmistakable. In that moment, she was like a survivor of a disaster. Once awake, she panted heavily, hand stroking her chest, realizing strongly and truly for the first time that this person wasn't Evan, but another. He had only been gone a few days. Not knowing why, he had silently occupied an overwhelming position in her brain. This made her flustered and confused. To cut off these complex feelings as soon as possible, she contacted a real estate agent the next day to rent an apartment. For the short term, she wasn't picky about conditions. She just found a place near the hospital, passable enough, making it easier to move luggage. She didn't tell anyone, so she moved everything personally, specifically taking advantage of the dark at night to move things out one by one, as if competing with time. Fortunately, everything was in time. Organizing the new place simply that night, she collapsed on the bed from exhaustion and fell asleep directly. Sleeping in the next day, the moment she opened her eyes, she was momentarily confused about where she was. Recovering her senses, she sighed, then picked up her phone to check messages. There was nothing. A layer of unknown loss floated up in her heart again. From now on, living alone again. Everything seemed like a dream. Wasn't life a dream anyway? She was lucky to have at least loved someone. Sliding the phone a few times, there was nothing more to see. Just as she wanted to turn it off, she glimpsed many messages in the community group chat, and someone had even her. Clicking in, there was a buzz of discussion inside. She only saw the latest message. It seemed to be about a disturbance in the underground parking lot. Clicking to view all messages, the group page slid directly to the top. Homeowner A, whose car is this? Parked in my spot. Please pass it on. Homeowner B, haven't seen it. Should be from your same building, right? Homeowner C, I seem to have seen it. There's only one of this car in our complex. It belongs to Unit 2101, right? Don't they have their own parking spot? Homeowner A, don't know. Anyway, it's been parked here since last night. Even a big brand can't be this domineering, right? It's early morning and hasn't moved yet. Is this family in the group? Can someone notify them ASAP? Homeowner D, I know this one. It's that little nurse's husband. I'll help you 2101. Homeowner E, speaking of which, going home at 8 p.m. last night, I saw this car in the parking lot. It was just about to drive out. Homeowner F, when I came back at midnight last night, someone threw up in the hallway. Seemed to be this gentleman I saw. Homeowner G, actually, my husband is on a business trip using the car these days. Our spot has been occupied by others. Seems to be this car. Several days in a row now, unexpectedly mooching off others' spots. Is it necessary? Buying 2 big spots yourself, and it's not enough to park. Nina read through all the messages, her mood complicated beyond words. Worried and flustered for whom she didn't want to realize, she just felt this news exploded. He hadn't reacted on his end yet, truly worrying. But on second thought, he went out at 8 p.m. last night. She was moving house at that time. Did she bump into him? And he lied about going on a business trip. Turns out he came back all these days. Then where did he sleep at night, or perhaps? Nina dared not think further. The urgent task was deciding to send him a message. She deliberated a few times, trying to appear concise. Property management called me, said to move your car, parked in the wrong spot. Sitting on the bed waiting for a full 5 minutes, there was no reply. Nina ignored him, getting up to wash. Her speed was flying fast. While dressing, she waited, still no signal. Not knowing who she was angry with, she simply grabbed her phone and keys, put on her shoes, went out, and ran quickly toward the apartment complex. Chapter 10, Nina told herself that she only made the special trip to notify him because she was off work that morning. And conveniently, she planned to discuss the divorce as well. In short, to avoid unnecessary entanglements, this should be the last time they met. Walking into the residential complex, she bumped into a security guard at the gate who glanced at her several times. She walked straight past, but still felt he was watching her. It was probably because she had moved several loads of things out last night, which inevitably attracted attention. She didn't know if it would become a topic of gossip. Entering the hallway, she pressed the elevator button to go up. Her heart couldn't help drumming in her chest. She thought about what she should say when she saw him, but even when the elevator reached the floor, she hadn't figured it out. Only then did she realize she had come too impulsively. What could she say? Leaving so thoroughly wasn't that her attitude? As for the car, he parked it there. It was none of her business. She had notified him, he could deal with it however he liked. Thinking it through, she pressed the button to close the elevator doors as soon as they opened. But a moment later, she quickly pressed the open button. The doors slowly slid open again, and this time she decisively stepped out. Forget it. I'm already here, I'll just take a look and leave. The code on the door was her birthday. She felt complicated as she entered it, wondering if he had changed it. A second later, the door opened. She exhaled lightly, trying her best to ignore the inexplicable feeling in her heart. Guessing he was still asleep, she moved quietly to observe the situation first. Just one step inside, she saw a pair of men's shoes kick off haphazardly. Clothes were also thrown randomly on the living room sofa. Presumably, after she left last night, he came home and, enjoying his solitude, didn't bother to tidy up. Nina squatted down and placed the shoes neatly side by side. The action was too subconscious. By the time she realized it, she was stunned. Feeling a bit defiant, she kicked the shoes into a mess again and ignored them. Seeing no one in the outer hall, she glanced toward the bedroom but didn't dare go over. Standing by the door, she took out her phone and called him. The number was still Evan's. It didn't go through. After the matter was exposed, he probably couldn't be bothered to use it anymore. Nina scrolled through her call log and found the string of numbers she had dialed last time. It wasn't saved under a name, but she recognized it instantly and pressed dial. While waiting anxiously, she listened for movement in the bedroom. There was no sound. She put down her phone. After struggling internally for a long time, she decided to go check. Just as she walked to the bedroom door, before her hand could grip the handle, the adjacent bathroom door opened from the inside. A man wearing only boxer briefs, his body damp, walked out. Ethan looked up and ran into Nina. His gaze froze simultaneously. He stopped in his tracks, looking her up and down without emotion. There was no look of intoxication on his face. Nina's hand was still hovering over the door handle. Her gaze was too hasty, inevitably sweeping over his entire body. Her cheeks involuntarily flushed red. She looked away, coughed uncomfortably, and whispered, "I forgot something. I came back to get it." She said that, but she didn't move. She didn't even have the courage to open the door and go in. Her feet seemed nailed to the spot, and the way he looked at her had no fluctuation whatsoever. Nina felt ashamed under his stare, feeling exactly like someone who had stormed off proudly only to return uninvited and shameless. Ethan didn't speak. He walked straight toward her and stopped a few inches away, simultaneously covering her hand on the doorknob and pushing the door open. He had just showered and radiated a faint scent, mixed with his unique body odor. It rushed over her, all familiar. Nina instinctively turned sideways and let go, standing awkwardly at the doorway. The room was half dim. The sheer curtains were drawn and the windows weren't open. The air was a bit stuffy, and she smelled a slightly strong scent of alcohol. It seemed his hangover was real. The atmosphere was very awkward. She stood numbly, hands hanging in front of her, not knowing what to do. There had never been a moment as tormenting as this. How did she end up here? How did things get to this step? At this moment, she felt her previous plans were all messed up. "Didn't you say you forgot something?" He spoke, pulling a shirt out of the closet and putting it on, his gaze shifting over. The shirt was clean and neat. Not long ago, she had ironed it and hung it up for him. Nina gave a soft, lowered her head, and walked a few steps into the bedroom. She stopped in front of the vanity, pulling open drawers at random to rummage, listening absent-mindedly to the sounds of him getting dressed. She didn't dare look back, pretending to be busy with her hands. "Your car is parked in the wrong spot. People have been calling me about it all morning." He responded nonchalantly, already buttoning his shirt. "Then remember to move it as soon as possible." She planned to ask where he had been these past few days, but thinking it over, it felt inappropriate, implying too much concern. He didn't make a sound, seemingly too lazy to respond. She looked back. He was already putting on his trousers, fastening his belt with his back to her. Nina continued to look down and search. She knew full well she had nothing left here, but she desperately wanted to grab something to hold in her hand and then leave this place as quickly as possible. "Are you sure you forgot something?" He finally finished dressing in his shirt and trousers, stopping by the door to ask her. Nina scratched her head, feeling the embarrassment of being seen through. She looked up to meet his gaze. "Yeah, a small bottle. I don't remember where it is. If you see it, just throw it away for me." As she spoke, she lowered her head and walked out, intending to leave right then. But he blocked the doorway, leaving a very narrow space. It would be difficult for her to pass. Passing by, she accidentally brushed against the edge of his clothes. She retracted her hand, shrinking her body as much as possible. Just as half her body made it out, her wrist was suddenly grabbed. She swayed and looked up, still confused, when her entire body was pushed against the door behind her. Ethan pinned both her wrists, pressing them separately on either side. Without saying a word, he lowered his head and kissed her. Nina was caught off guard. Her mouth was captured as soon as she opened it. He tilted his head, eyes closed, applying heavy pressure. She was stunned for 5 seconds before remembering to resist. Helplessly, her hands were controlled, so she lifted her leg to knee him. He noticed before she could kick twice. Instantly, his whole body pressed against her, pinning her firmly to the door. Nina completely lost any space to move. She twisted, constantly trying to break free, which only incited a more frantic, heated kiss from him. Only when she was about to run out of air did he stop, separating reluctantly. He looked at her from a few inches away, a light in his eyes. Nina gasped for air. When her breathing calmed, she pursed her lips to say something, but he came at her again with precision, making her dizzy and weak. This time, it became light and gentle, carrying a deeply affectionate and intense gaze, as if to burn her. "Follow me," he murmured low. His hands no longer restrained her, changing into a tight embrace, seeming to guide and expect a similar response from her. Nina knew she was awake, but he was gradually losing control, intoxicated in this domineering deep kiss. She didn't give any response. Everything was led by him. In that instant, looking at his face, she actually couldn't recall what Evan was like or what he had said. Her mind was empty, stolen away along with her breath by the person in front of her, leaving almost nothing behind. She panicked more and more. Pushing him a few times with her hands had no effect. Taking advantage of a gap when he paused to breathe, she turned her head, struggling to dodge his kiss, and for some reason, 2 words popped out of her mouth. "Evan!" The air suddenly went quiet. He indeed stopped. His whole person calmed down significantly. He panted quietly, arms still holding her, his gaze falling coldly on her face. Nina lowered her head, daring not to look him in the eye. Then, in the sudden silence, she heard him give a cold chuckle and mock himself. "You just can't forget him." Her heart throbbed with pain, not knowing for whom she was sad. The heartbeat under her palm was beating strongly, like his suppressed and restrained anger, making her body and mind tremble. Just now, she had said Evan's name. In front of him, it was like a taboo. He was thoroughly angry. His hands released her, and he turned his back, seemingly unwilling to look at her anymore. Looking very powerless, he waved his hand and said, "Go." Nina didn't know how she left, how she pressed the elevator button, or how she exited the complex. By the time she came back to her senses like a lost soul, she was already on the noisy, bustling street. She looked down at the time. It was still early. He was probably going to work. Everything was just right, nothing was wasted. But something had indeed been wasted. That was an emotion she couldn't understand right now, her thoughts slowly being occupied by one person. She lied about leaving something there. Only after coming out did she vaguely realize that she really seemed to have left something there, but she would never have the chance to retrieve it, nor did she dare. Sasha had been very happy these past few days. Her mood was the most lively in the department. Nina heard her say she met a handsome guy on a blind date, and the guy happened to like her too. They were in the flirting stage. Nina forced a smile, wishing her a speedy exit from singlehood. Sasha beamed with joy, looking back at her. "Something's wrong with you lately. Your face is long all day. Did you fight with your husband?" Nina minded her own business, not showing unhappiness, but didn't know how to answer. She shook her head. "No." Sasha patted her shoulder, scrutinizing her complexion carefully. "Then are you pregnant? Did you go for a checkup? You look terrible, just like that woman at the entrance of obstetrics and gynecology." Nina dismissed her with a sentence. "Stop talking nonsense." In the interim, she went to the restroom to wash her hands. Looking at herself in the mirror, she was indeed a bit haggard, but she hadn't thought in that direction. She knew her physical condition somewhat well, but she couldn't help being alerted by Sasha's words. If she had to say, it wasn't impossible. But at a critical juncture like this, she didn't want to consider such things. It seemed that if she did, all her decisions would lose their meaning. She stopped thinking about it and continued to throw herself into work, leaving herself no time to care. For the next few days, Nina lived quietly alone. It couldn't be more normal, until Saturday evening. She was just preparing to get off work when she received a call from Mrs. Norris. "Nina, come home for dinner tonight." Nina twirled the pen in her fingertips, opening her mouth and pausing. "Okay." After that incident, she hadn't gone home for several days. She did miss her parents. Mrs. Norris seemed to be busy buying groceries on the other end, in a very good mood. "Tell Evan to pick you up." "Come together." "Mom." Nina paused for a long time, thinking of what to say. "He's busy on a business trip. He doesn't have time." "Nonsense." Mrs. Norris was calculating money with the vendor while talking to her. "Your dad is right next to me. He just got off the phone with him. He said he's at the company and will pick you up later." The pen dropped from Nina's hand. She pressed her hand on the table, not knowing how to speak. Because her mom was in a hurry to hang up, she hurriedly said, "Just come over after work. Don't delay and don't buy anything. Be careful on the road." After speaking, she hung up. Beep, 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 the busy tone sounded. Chapter 11. Nina waited until it was time to get off work, went to the locker room to change, holding her phone at a loss. She found that number in her call log. She wanted to call him directly, but in the end, decided to send a message. The WeChat name was still Evan. Seeing this name, she paused for a moment, exited, and tapped into the search bar at the top, inputting a mobile number. The nickname that came up was a concise abbreviation, EE. There was no information on it, and even the profile picture was pitch black. Nina put down her phone, finished changing clothes first, then took the rest to be washed. Only after doing a series of trivial tasks did she hesitantly add his number. As soon as she tapped it, she regretted it. Just to say one sentence, was it worth it? Although she thought so in her heart, she still checked her phone from time to time. No movement. She suddenly felt she was being pretentious, so she simply tapped into the previous chat box with Evan and edited a sentence straightforwardly. "No matter what my parents say, you don't need to worry about it. I will go and explain." Sending it out, her heart eased a bit, but she still felt a blockage somewhere. Just as she put down the phone, a message came in. It wasn't from Evan, but from EE. There were only a few words on it. "Come out, I've arrived." Nina's heart suddenly skipped a beat. At that moment, she had just walked outside the hospital. Turning her head, she looked at the bustling traffic on the street, unable to distinguish where his car was for a moment. Just as she lingered on the spot for a moment, the sound of a horn came from the right. Nina looked toward the sound. A car was slowly approaching her. The car window was fully open. The person inside had his gaze on her, deep and unreadable. The horn sounded a few times. Nina couldn't ignore it. She bit the bullet and walked toward him, stopping by the car door. His gaze had been locked on her face. When she arrived in front of him, he said, "Get in." Nina didn't move her body, speaking with difficulty. "I told my parents." "You don't need to go." His expression was distant and cold. "Are you sure they know about our situation? One thing is one thing." She raised her face to look at him, trying to make herself appear more confident. "I will explain to my parents." He asked again, "Do you mean it has nothing to do with me, or that we are already divorced?" After a moment, her head lowered again. "I see you're quite busy and haven't had time to talk. When you have time, let's go process it." Saying this, the atmosphere became strange, but since there were many people coming and going around them, she deliberately ignored it. He turned his head away, no longer looking at her. "Get in the car to talk to me. I don't have time to waste with you here." Nina couldn't move her feet, thinking, "What for? Is it to discuss the divorce or go to my house? There's no need to make it so complex." "You forgot what day it is today," he suddenly said. She was baffled for a moment. She really didn't know. "What day?" He turned his head sideways, looking at her. "Your birthday." Nina opened her mouth, stunned. Suddenly she remembered today was indeed her birthday. She whispered, "Didn't we already celebrate it last time?" He said, "Your parents specifically asked me not to tell you so they could celebrate for you. If you want to throw cold water on them when their spirits are high, I won't stop you." Nina couldn't say a single word for a moment. It seemed if she really did that, it wouldn't be a filial move. Like a ghost at work, she didn't know why, but she ended up getting in his car. Along the way, he didn't speak either, staring intently at the street ahead, intentionally letting the air go cold. Nina wanted to strike up a conversation several times. Looking at his cold profile, she hesitated and stopped. Soon, they arrived downstairs at her apartment complex. Nina was still thinking about how to handle the relationship with him in front of her parents. As soon as she stepped out of the car, she bumped into Mrs. Norris returning from buying things. "Mrs." Norris had already seen them. She shouted their names from far away. As she approached, she happily introduced them to the neighbor beside her. "My daughter and son-in-law are back." The neighbor praised appropriately. "Daughter and son-in-law are a good match." Nina walked to the car to wait for Mrs. Norris. Ethan got out from the other side and went to open the trunk. Coincidentally, facing the direction Mrs. Norris was coming from, Ethan lifted several boxes of fruit and nutritional supplements from inside, placing them on the ground one by one, stunning Mrs. Norris and the neighbor. Nina was also stunned. She had absolutely no idea when he bought them. Seeing the pile of things on the ground, Mrs. Norris hurried over. "Oh my, didn't we agree not to buy anything? Why spend so much money?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Bought them beforehand, saves going out usually." The neighbor stood aside, face full of envy. "The son-in-law is really good. Old Norris's family is blessed." Mrs. Norris smiled back. "Children have their own blessings. Yours is quite good too." After speaking, not knowing where to start, Mrs. Norris called out to Nina, "What are you staring for? Help carry them." Nina gave an "oh" and buried her head to pick up those boxes of fruit. Just as she bent down, she was stopped by someone. She saw him pick them up first, lifting his chin toward the trunk. "Take that." Nina didn't understand. Leaning in to look, she saw an exquisite cake box inside. Before she could be dazed, she lifted it out. She prepared to take something else, but saw there was nothing left on the ground. Half of the light things were taken by Mrs. Norris, and the remaining heavy ones were all stacked in his hands. He had no hands free. He instructed her, "Slam the door shut." Nina put down the cake and used both hands to close the trunk door, using a lot of force to shut it. After finishing, he said again, "Go up." Nina watched him stand there for a long time, as if specifically waiting for her. She reached out, "How about I carry some?" He turned his body sideways, rejecting her kindness with action. This left her helpless. "Not going up yet," he urged her. Nina simply gave up, stepping on the stairs ahead of him. She tried to go up quickly without taking up space, while pausing to look back to see if he was struggling. Her home was on the 5th floor, and the unit building had no elevator, relying entirely on stairs. Reaching the 3rd floor, Nina heard Mrs. Norris talking upstairs. Taking advantage of the lack of outsiders at this moment, she stopped against the wall and asked him, "Why buy so many things?" He happened to turn the corner. Unknown if he was too relaxed or too tired, his footsteps didn't stop as he walked past her. He glanced at her and said, "I want you to feel indebted to me from the bottom of your heart." Nina stood on the spot, listening to this sentence come out of his mouth, then watched him walk up, leaving her behind. When Nina carried the cake through the door, she saw her parents warmly entertaining Ethan. One took things from his hands, the other helped him find shoes to wear. Mrs. Norris disliked that Mr. Norris took the wrong ones, slapping his hand. Not that pair. Didn't I buy new ones last time? Get those. Hearing this, Mr. Norris hurried to switch them. Ethan appeared very at ease, saying he could wear any shoes. After he was done, he turned back to greet Nina standing at the door. Come in. In that moment, she saw a shallow smile on his face. He pulled her in very affectionately, like the scenes from previous nights when he waited for her to return from work at the door. Her head was dizzy. On one side were her parents sighing over how many things were bought. On the other was Ethan kindly explaining to the two elders. Nina stood awkwardly. This was her home, yet now she had become the uncomfortable one. Mr. Norris was the chef for dinner, and Mrs. Norris helped. To avoid awkwardness, Nina hid in the kitchen to cut fruit. Mrs. Norris came in, taking the work from her hands. I'll do it. You go out and keep him company. Nina let go and went to the living room, but didn't see Ethan. She looked around and saw her room door was open, realizing that was probably where he went. Walking over to push the door, inside was the room she knew so well. He was standing by the desk, looking at her old knickknacks. He stood sideways. Hearing movement, he didn't look up, seriously examining the thing in his hand, putting one down to look at another. Until finally, he picked up a personal portrait photo on her desk. Nina quietly closed the door. She had to walk over. Not stopping him, she tidied her desk absently and said, "Why act like this?" His gaze moved from the photo frame to look at her. Staring for a moment, he said, "And why do you have to act like this? In this life, apart from him, can you really not marry anyone else?" "That's not it," she said calmly, not wanting to speak loudly and arouse her parents' suspicion. "It's that I can't face you. You are his brother. I can't be with you." She couldn't continue the rest of the sentence. Unknown when she had a scale in her heart. She barely kept her footing in the middle without wavering. Leaning toward either side made her feel guilty. "Can't be with me, how?" He put down the photo frame, pulled her in front of him, and forced her to look at him directly. "Can't kiss me or can't make love to me? You've done both and more than once. Do you think you can erase that? Or in your heart, do only first come, first served matters?" She bit her lip tight and shook her head. "That's not it. Then what is it?" He tilted his head back, looking out the window, and gave a light chuckle. "Or is it that you can't face this face of mine because every time you see me, you think of him?" She shook her head gently again but couldn't speak. He had his head held high and didn't see it. Looking down again to see her face full of distress and extreme struggle, he felt it was even more ridiculous. He took a step forward, forcing her back into a narrow corner, trapping her with his arms. Lowering his head, his eyes bore into hers. "I understand. Being with me makes you feel like it's incest, disgusting, is that it?" Nina looked up in panic, meeting his sharp gaze. There was faintly suppressed anger inside, as if to burn a hole in her face. Only because this was her home did he not vent it immediately. She forgot to breathe in fear, unable to catch her breath several times. In that moment, a gust of wind seemed to blow into her heart. The scale was blown, tilting a few degrees. Chapter 12. The two stood confronting each other in a small corner. There was no intense hostility, only the subtle flow of waves between their meeting gazes. Nina didn't have time to adjust the conflicting struggle in her heart. She only saw a certain disappointment flash past the depths of his eyes which carried hatred. It was quickly shut out by him closing his eyes forcefully, then straightening up and averting his gaze, not letting her see. After an unknown amount of time, Mrs. Norris knocked on the door outside. "Nina, come out for dinner." Afraid the other party would push the door in, Nina hurriedly raised her voice. "Coming." She looked at him cautiously, lowering her voice. "Let's eat." He looked at her, his expression still not very good. She suddenly thought of a phrase, spinning a cocoon to bind oneself. But she didn't say another word, walking out first, as if that made her seem cruel. At the dinner table, Mrs. Norris lit candles to celebrate the birthday, rambling about how old her daughter had turned in the blink of an eye, while telling Ethan interesting stories from her childhood. The latter was humble and polite in front of the elders, occasionally replying with a smile. Nina observed him from the side. He was completely different from the person in the room just now. She only felt he did an excellent job at disguising this aspect. One couldn't see what he was thinking under that nonchalant exterior at all. Mr. Norris was in a cheerful mood. He specially took out a bottle of good wine and asked Ethan, "Can you drink a little?" Ethan didn't refuse. Nina said anxiously, "Dad, he has to drive later. He can't drink." "Oh, right," Mr. Norris remembered, stopping the bottle he was about to pour. "Actually, this alcohol content isn't low either, but safety first." Nina inadvertently said again, "Mom, I haven't kept you company in a long time. I'll sleep at home tonight. You won't dislike me, right?" As she spoke, out of the corner of her eye, she felt someone looking over, glancing at her seemingly unintentionally a few times. She pretended not to feel it, lowering her head to eat a mouthful of food. "What dislike? This is your home." Mrs. Norris laughed, then urged her, "Why are you in a hurry to eat? Cut the cake first." Nina put down her chopsticks, stood up to cut a few pieces, distributing them to her parents first, then handing one to him. He looked up at her and didn't take it. Both parents were watching with smiles. She felt awkward for a moment, extending it again. Just as she wanted to put it down directly, she heard him say, "Where's the fork?" Nina realized she had given the cake but forgot the fork. Searching around, she found one and quickly stuck it into the soft cake. Only then did he accept it, smiling faintly at her. His fingers accidentally touched hers, and his gaze deepened a bit. Nina's face flushed red. Not wanting anyone to notice, she quickly lowered her head and cut a small piece for herself too. The cream melted in the mouth, sweet but not greasy, tasting fresh. She didn't know how he managed to order it in such a short time. She ate with a heavy heart. Glancing to the side, she saw he had only eaten a few bites before putting it aside, seemingly not fond of it. Clearing the cake, Mr. Norris served dishes one after another, almost filling the entire table. "Your dad doesn't usually cook. It just happens to be your birthday today, and coincidentally Evan had time, so he thought of showing off his skills." Mrs. Norris laughed as she spoke, then greeted her son-in-law, "Evan, eat more vegetables. Don't stand on ceremony in your own home." Nina was picking up food. Hearing this name, she frowned. Turning her head to look at his expression, she also felt somewhat resentful, but he excelled at handling micro-expressions naturally, so the two elders at the table noticed nothing wrong. Nina retracted her chopsticks into her mouth, chewing slowly, the taste in her heart complex. Mrs. Norris said again, "I called Nina, and she even said you were busy on a business trip and had no time. I said she's confusing day and night with work, busy until she's dizzy." Ethan stopped halfway through eating, smiling. She remembered correctly. "I did go on a business trip, only I came back early." Mrs. Norris looked at her daughter. "This was planning to come back, to celebrate your birthday." Nina paused her chopsticks, her heart uncomfortable. She forced a smile that implied shyness. The Norris elders were retired teachers, thick with scholarly air, and didn't understand business capital models. But because they had some interest in stocks recently, they chatted with Ethan about this aspect. The latter was a professional expert, explaining a few industry terms in simple language and clearly giving some reference directions. Nina listened silently and actually understood some of it. Halfway through the meal, Mr. Norris chatted happily and asked Ethan, "Work tomorrow?" Hearing this, Ethan shook his head. "Resting for a day. Then that's perfect. Sleep here tonight?" Mr. Norris got excited and went to get the wine bottle. "Don't quit drinking either. Drink what needs to be drunk." Seeing this, Nina looked at the person beside her. He seemed to default to not refusing. She was anxious inside, hurriedly stopping her dad. "Dad, I was joking just now. I still have a night shift. I'm not sleeping at home tonight." Hearing this, Mr. Norris sighed, blaming her, "Making your mom happy for nothing. You don't have time to come home usually either. Then wait for next time." Saying that, he changed the subject and chatted about other things. Before leaving at night, Mrs. Norris packed some extra stewed meat for Nina to take back to eat. Mr. Norris chatted well with Ethan. While seeing them to the door, he was suddenly stuffed with a stack of money. Mr. Norris hurriedly pushed it back, repeatedly saying no, but it was stuffed back again. Seeing this, Mrs. Norris also politely asked him to take it back. Ethan simply placed it on the shoe cabinet. "Didn't bring much cash. I'll add more later." Nina felt it wasn't right to refuse either, naturally standing on the same line as him, persuading her parents to accept it. The two adults pushed back and forth, but finally accepted it. Going downstairs and getting in the car, Mrs. Norris still exhorted repeatedly, saying how to cook the twice-cooked pork and reminded the two not to work too hard and come visit more often when free. Parents always loved to nag when they got old. Nina took it to heart, but didn't know if the person beside her would be annoyed. However, seeing his expression wasn't cold, she felt a bit relieved. The return journey was a bit of a distance, and the night traffic was congested. Nina remembered the money stuffing incident just now and asked him, "How much money did you give my parents just now?" He glanced at her. His expression was no longer like before, reverting to the Cold War mode. "Wanna pay me back?" he mocked. She knew he had plenty of money and wouldn't care if she paid him back. Perhaps he was used to giving money casually, but she still wanted to know. "I'm just asking. You didn't need to do that just now. Why? Makes you feel even more indebted to me?" His tone carried a smile, but it wasn't a real laugh. If so, then that's quite good. Nina kept her breath steady, trying to appear calm without fluctuations. Hearing this sentence, she still couldn't help feeling flustered, not knowing where to look. Unknown since when, she gradually lost the temper to tit for tat with him, but felt more like a person with heavy sins. And all this was because of his sudden change. Clearly, he said at the beginning he approached her because of Evan. Why did it now seem unclear to her? How much true or false emotion was mixed in this, and not just toward her, but even toward her parents? He wasn't sloppy at all. For a moment, she even thought, if she had met him first, that would have been quite good. There wouldn't be so many tangled emotions, changing unpredictably and impenetrable. But the facts were in front of her. She knew Evan first. Those pasts couldn't be erased. Just like every time she was intimate with him, she had to think of Evan's existence first, and consequently couldn't cross that hurdle in her heart. The car's route would pass by Nina's residence first. Waiting before the intersection, she spoke up, "Turn right ahead." Ethan didn't answer. She had no idea in her heart, thinking this was his car, he had the final say on how to drive. Even if he drove past, she had no reason to argue. When the green light turned on and they reached the intersection, he turned the steering wheel, turning into the cross street. Gradually, the car slowed to a stop. Nina looked out the car. It was exactly the alley exit she usually passed. From this, it was visible that he wasn't completely ignorant of some of her affairs. And she surprisingly didn't find it strange. Perhaps she had already tacitly accepted the existence of this behavior. She didn't get out immediately, turning to look at him. "Shall we talk?" He opened the window, lit a cigarette, and preempted her. "Except for the divorce." Nina opened her mouth. Before she could say it, he shot it down. Thinking about it, it was normal. The few times she mentioned it, it didn't seem to put him in a good mood to respond. "Fine, I won't talk about that for now." She took a step back. "I don't know what you think. Maybe you feel you've lost face or something. When you've thought it through, we'll talk again." He took a drag of the cigarette, resting the hand holding it outside the car, and suddenly turned his head to stare at her. "My meaning is, there's no possibility in the future either. We are both adults. You should know some things aren't one-sided wishful thinking." "It is my one-sided wishful thinking," he murmured. "Then, have you ever thought about why I would do this?" She looked at that section of cigarette outside the window, blown crimson by the wind, burning a flame. She whispered, "I don't know, that's a question for yourself." He didn't speak, staring at her almost without blinking. The atmosphere was silent, after a long time. "If it's in the name of love," he paused. "Would you be willing?" Nina held her breath, daring not look at him. She slowly turned back, but felt her body wasn't her own anymore. He looked at her profile and said again, "You should ask your heart what exactly you care about." Nina got out of the car. Her gaze watched his car turn around and disappear at the street corner before she turned to walk into the alley. It was dark and narrow inside. She hadn't felt anything before, but looking up at the moon at this moment, she felt a sudden lonely desolation. A few days later on the early shift, Nina stayed with Sasha mixing liquid medicine. She hadn't slept well for several days, yawning from time to time. Sasha looked at the heavy dark circles above her mask and said, "Your spirit isn't too good lately." Nina rubbed her eyes. "Duty shifts are irregular. What good spirit can there be?" Sasha said, "There haven't been night shifts these past few days." She knew where the reason lay, couldn't find an excuse, and was too lazy to respond. Sasha suggested, "Get off work in the evening and go shopping with me." Nina was mentally tired and had no energy, but thinking it could relieve the recent pressure, she didn't refuse. After work, the two went to the most lively mall plaza nearby. Watched a movie first, then had a meal, then browsed skincare and makeup counters. When a woman's interest came, some gloom was temporarily swept away. Sasha bought a lot, both hands full. Nina teased, in a very good mood lately. Is something good about to happen? Not that fast, Sasha laughed to cover up. Passing the jewelry counter, seeing the dazzling silver ornaments, she couldn't help stopping and calling Nina. Quick look, so pretty. Nina stopped too, her gaze admiring casually. She didn't have much interest in these, but looking around, she remembered the ring Evan gave her and couldn't help raising her hand to look. It was sitting quietly on her ring finger. She had worn it for some time and surprisingly got used to it like this. She touched that ring, thinking about Evan the person. For a moment, she actually couldn't recall many things. Her heart felt uncomfortable. That feeling of depression floated up again, and she couldn't help clenching her fist. Sasha was fascinated looking at the rings. The sales lady smiled and attended to them. Would you like to take a closer look? Sasha waved her hand. No need, no need. Then she called Nina over. Nina, come look. Does this ring look quite like the one on your hand? Nina leaned over to look, comparing it with hers. The general design was similar, with slight differences. The sales lady also saw the ring on her hand. Looking a few times, she suddenly realized, the one this lady is wearing is exactly our store's latest model. Nina was dumbfounded. You mean this ring was sold from here? The other party smiled and answered, not necessarily, but I can be sure it's a style from our brand. Sasha leaned in to look. So coincident, this isn't far from your home. Maybe your husband bought it from here. Nina pulled a smile, silent for a moment. The sales lady interjected, it's really possible. Some time ago, I met a male customer who came to buy this ring. Thinking of something, Nina suddenly asked, when? Seeing she seemed very eager to know and treating her as a returning customer, the other party went to check the sales record, turned back, and reported a date. Nina pondered that date, pushing back to recall what happened then. The more she thought, the more she felt something was wrong, even completely wrong. Her hands trembled slightly. She held them together to stop the shaking, then looked earnestly at the sales lady asking, can you help me check who the buyer was? The other party hesitated, obviously suspicious of Nina's request. The ring was on her hand. How could she not know who bought it? Sorry, this involves customer privacy. We cannot disclose it to you for the time being. Nina nodded understandingly, but unwilling to give up, said, when that person bought the ring, did he say anything? The other party recalled a bit and nodded. I remember when he chose that ring, he said he wanted to engrave inside. I thought it should be his or his lover's name initials. Nina instantly gripped her ring tight. Chapter 13, coming out of the mall, the neon lights were on outside, and the sky was completely dark. Nina stood in the bright spot of a huge billboard, pinching her ring finger in a daze. Only at this moment did she realize she had never paid attention to the inside of the ring, to what mysterious information might be there. Just now, reminded by someone, although she didn't take off the ring to verify on the spot, a thirst for knowledge was inexplicably at work in her heart. She felt a stinging, itchy pain from her fingertips, binding that weak nerve. Sasha left, leaving her alone. Nina reached out to remove it. It took some effort. The pad of her finger was stuck red and swollen. When she took it off and held it between two fingertips, finding a better angle to shine it under the light, turning the arc little by little, she saw two tiny English letters impressively engraved on the inner circle. This was definitely not a single name abbreviation. Conversely, her hand suddenly clenched tight. The ring was wrapped inside, the raised part pressing against her palm, like a person falling into her heart, seemingly unintentional, yet already deeply engraved. Nina walked home along the road. Several streetlights in the alley were broken. The dark night was lightless. The weather had also turned cold. A gust of wind blew. She hugged her body, shivering. Arriving home, she was extremely tired. Turning on the desk lamp, she took out that ring to look again. This time, she looked even more meticulously. Just those two letters she stared at for a long time. Then the details of the ring, tracing its shape with her gaze, counting the diamonds inlaid on it. She didn't know exactly how long she sat there. She only felt her heart getting emptier and emptier, uncomfortably panicked, suffocating. When Ethan's call came, Nina had already gone to bed. She had slept for a while and was groggy. Groping for her phone and turning on the light, she glimpsed that familiar number, and her sleepiness cleared up by half. Ignoring the cold, she immediately sat up from the bed, her heart about to leap out of her chest, maintaining composure as she answered. "Hello," the background on the other end was very noisy. Someone confirmed, "Is this Mrs. Evans?" It wasn't Ethan's voice. Nina put down the phone to check. It was indeed his number. Putting it back to her ear, she asked, "Who are you?" The other party didn't say who they were, only said, "Do you have time to come out? Mr. Evans, Nina immediately took the conversation. "What happened to him? He drank too much and refuses to let anyone drive him home." The other party probably knew something, considering their wording. "I saw his phone kept dialing your number but not connecting, so I took the chance to call you. Better come to persuade him, he can't even stand steadily." Nina got out of the car and arrived at the designated location. Looking down at the time, it was just past midnight. She arrived in only 20 minutes. It seemed she came too fast. She hesitated at the entrance for a while, finally deciding to go in. This was a business lounge. Even late at night, there were quite a few guests coming and going. Presumably, he was discussing business here today. She didn't know why he drank too much. She really hadn't seen him addicted to alcohol. Learning from the neighbors' few words last time, what she saw at the end was already his sober appearance. Following the room number given by the other party, Nina arrived outside the private room quickly. Hand on the doorknob, she dared not push in. A song seemed to be playing inside, leaking some sound. It was a familiar melody. She couldn't recall which one for a moment. Just then, the door was pulled open by force from the inside. Nina looked up. It was a strange man in a suit. He looked her up and down and asked, "Mrs. Evans?" Nina opened her mouth and nodded. "Did you call me?" "Yes, yes." The other party immediately invited her inside, seemingly waiting for a long time. "Mr. Evans is right inside." Nina took a step and looked in. She didn't see anyone. Looking around the circle, only then did she see a long-haired woman with a slender figure sitting by the door, her gaze concernedly staring at the person sleeping on the sofa. That person wore a shirt, suit pants, legs resting on the fruit platter on the coffee table. Beside him were several empty liquor bottles and cans. His tie was askew and half undone. His arm covered his eyes, face invisible in a drunken state. She fanned the smell of alcohol in the air with her hand, hearing the man beside her greet the woman by the sofa, urging, "Let's go, hurry." The woman seemed unwilling. "Can't you see he hasn't woken up yet? I'm worried." "No need for you to worry." The man pulled her quickly, voice getting lower. "His legal wife is here. Don't get involved." Only then did that woman stand up to look at Nina. Standing on thick heels, she was a head taller than her. Her look wasn't friendly, retort indifferent, "So you're his wife." Then she pushed the man beside her with her arm. "When did he get married?" The man pushed her to walk. "Why do you care so much? Just mind yourself." After speaking, they walked out of the private room together, closing the door. Nina stood on the spot, not daring to take a step forward. The whole room only heard the song playing. The melody gradually reached a climax, and the lyrics became clear, stabbing straight into her heart. "I already believe there are some people I'll never have to wait for, so I understand why I would cry in the dimly lit place. You won't believe how happy marrying me tomorrow would be. I just want you to understand I am willing to love, love, love until I'm sick." She walked to his side, looking down from above for a while. Seeing no movement from him, as if he fell asleep, chest breathing steadily. Nina slowly squatted down, looking at his face from his chin. Under the hazy light was a soundly drunk state, breathing heavy, looking uncomfortable. She wanted to call him, opened her mouth but made no sound. She pushed his arm lightly with her hand. "Wake up," no reaction. She pushed a few more times, calling out softly, "Ethan, let's go home to sleep, okay?" He straightened his leg, then propped up to shift his body, but seemed to want to continue sleeping. Nina took the opportunity to lean forward, removing his raised arm to reveal his whole face, eyes shut tight. Coincidentally, lacking support, his head turned toward her. He coughed once, the smell of alcohol intense. Nina shook his body along with his arm, determined to shake him awake. After a while, he finally squinted his eyes open, meeting her face, looking at her half awake and half drunk. Nina paused. Thinking of calling his name, she changed her words. "You're awake. Hurry, let's go home." He didn't respond, breathing light and slow. Thus, the lyrics in the background seemed exceptionally monotonous and fitting. "I want to use a goodbye kiss as an ending. Unexpectedly, you only said I'm not allowed to cry, not letting me understand." The song finally ended. She felt her heart was also finished being sliced. Every sentence inside seemed to be complaining to her. Waiting for the ending sound to subside, he raised his hand, touching her face. She didn't dodge, feeling his fingertips scorching hot, and said to her, "You came." Nina's throat was dry. She wanted to cry but couldn't, feeling extremely uncomfortable. She nodded, then lowered her head. He pasted another hand up, cupping her face while lying on his side, fingers rubbing forcefully a few times, seemingly feeling it wasn't an illusion. Pulling her close, he scrutinized. "It's really you." A waiter pushed the door open a crack, looking around inside, seeing Nina and asking, "Not planning to leave yet?" She immediately replied, "Leaving right now." After speaking, disregarding that he was still observing, she wanted to get up and pull him up. Helplessly, her face was held firmly by him. He even leaned his whole face forward, kissing her messily. Nina was startled and in pain, resisting and trying to push him away. Instead, she was pulled into his arms by the momentum. Her footing unstable, she half fell onto him right there. He used his drunkenness to continue the deep kiss, tongue rolling over her. One hand pressed the back of her head, not letting her move. Nina kicked her feet, trying to break free. Helplessly, the space was too small, she couldn't exert force at all, making her anxious and panicked. "MMH? Have to go home. Let go of me, okay? Go home." Hearing this word, he stopped. Hands not letting her go, eyes looking quietly, asking her, "Where are you going back to?" She equivocated. "You're drunk, I'll take you back first." Still leaving. He seemed a bit more sober, gaining some spirit. Half propping up to sit, grabbing her hand, asking, "Are you still leaving?" She couldn't answer. Her throat felt like a bottleneck, strangled by someone. After a long time, he seemed to give up, whispering, "Let's go." His feet stood on the ground, body a bit unsteady. Nina hurriedly stepped close to support him. He leaned onto her shoulder with the momentum, impossible to shake off, so she could only lead him out of the club all the way. Nina couldn't drive, naturally abandoning his car here. There were many taxi businesses at midnight. Several parked by the roadside. A driver greeted warmly. Nina got into one randomly, intending to let him sit in first, but her hand was held fast, pulling her down to sit together. She was helpless, adjusting her sitting posture, reporting the address to the driver. The car just started, his whole body leaned over. His arm wrapped around her shoulder from behind, kneading her straight into his embrace, then burying his head in the crook of her neck, panting heavily while drawing in the scent of her neck and shoulder, repeatedly inhaling deeply and pecking kisses, actions very ambiguous. The driver glanced over from the rearview mirror, eyes secretly peeping. Nina had scruples, pushing his head to the other side, only to suffer even more encroaching intimacy from him. Breath sprayed on the sensitive root of her ear, causing her to shrink her neck, afraid to move. Later, he finally restrained himself a bit, just holding her, occasionally kissing her hair, small movements still unceasing. She simply stopped moving too, docilely letting him encircle her, body pressed against his chest. The world was quiet enough to hear each other's heartbeats. Arriving at the complex entrance, Nina got out first, turning back to support him while taking things. He could walk by himself, but his steps swayed slightly. His gaze followed her closely, seemingly afraid she would vanish from sight the next second. Nina hung her head. Her hand reached over to stick to his lower back, only then making people reassured, saying, "Let's go in." He gave a nose breath very heavy. Night wind blew, her hair flew and fluttered. Already loose and scattered, it instantly covered her face. Her two hands had no space. Being cold again, she hugged him tighter. In that moment, a hand reached up, slowly brushing away the hair on her face, curling it behind her ear meticulously, again and again. Until the end, pinching her cheek with his hand. Nina's heart beat wildly all the way. Some things seemed uncontrollable anymore, about to undergo some change. Even her footsteps were floating and trembling. She didn't know, and didn't want to know, perhaps more afraid to know. Heart apprehensive and uneasy, straight until the door of the house, unlocking the password lock with her birthday. Those previously unspeakable feelings came one after another again. In that instant, she wanted to flee in panic. Discerned of her motive by him, he imprisoned her waist and brought her in, slamming the door. With a snap, the hall light turned on. Nina looked up blankly, seeing his face clearly, floating with unfaded drunkenness, enlarging gradually before her eyes. She wasn't unfamiliar with this look. Pushing his chest in time, head turned aside saying, "Go wash up." He didn't listen or move, grabbing the hand in front, moving it to his heart. It was beating strongly at a fast frequency there. She seemed to touch a hot potato, wanting to withdraw her hand, but was forced to press down, truly feeling it. His heart was beating, but her heart was in chaos. Not only that, everything seemed chaotic. She backed against the door, hand reaching behind wanting to open it. Just touching the handle, it was snatched down by him, forcefully pulling her close, trapping her against the long cabinet on the side. She was panic-stricken, stretching her hand trying to pull again, unable to reach no matter what. Instead, he took the chance to lean close and sniff, murmuring, "You smell so good." Nina had showered before bed. Right now, she couldn't smell it no matter what. Her nose was filled entirely with his alcohol scent, dyeing her drunk too. Suddenly, she didn't know what she should do next. Everything started becoming uncontrolled. She wanted to make some sound, but was trapped by subjective consciousness, suddenly thinking this wasn't bad either. Ethan swept away the sundries on the long cabinet, picking her up and placing her on it. She struggled to get down as soon as she sat. He held her, coaxing that it would be fine in a moment. She believed him, didn't move again. Brain like it was filled with paste, not understanding what this moment was for, heart both anticipating and afraid. He, however, was more direct and thorough than she thought. She felt desperate, as if she was no longer Nina. From now on, running in the opposite direction of her past self. But it seemed only this way was she complete. That heart, which had been incomplete and lost for days, finally obtained fulfillment. The light in the living room was too bright, dazzling the eyes. She slowly closed her eyes, until with a spin she was carried into the bedroom. When Nina woke up, the sky was still dark. The person behind her was sleeping deeply, but the sleeping posture demonstrated possessiveness. Arms firm as iron, she couldn't even move to turn over. Reaching out to touch the nightstand, wanting to turn on the light, but grabbed a mobile phone. It was his. She looked back at him, breathing even and shallow. Whole body hearty and dripping, wouldn't wake up for a while. After hesitating in her heart for a long time, she finally pressed his phone to light it up. Password required at the top. She decisively entered the last 4 digits of the door password. Guessed right on the first try. A matter within reason, no surprise. The information he stored inside wasn't much, photos also very few. Personal interests were drably few. She opened WeChat. Many friends inside, all formulaic tones. Opened Moments friends circle. There were a few posts too, mostly shares. The albums visible for now were basically set to private. The time span was large. The latest share was a text. "Aside from anxiety and pain, you are my third emotion, but you don't know it all." Nina felt her body turn cold, shrinking closer to the person behind, continuing to scroll down. Saw a sentence, also private. "That kind of happiness blinds me. Time was the month before last." At that time, she already knew Evan. Continuing to scroll forward, found a photo in their hospital. There were no close-up figures on it, only a messy and crowded background. Caption, "Saw her." She noticed the date, shocked abruptly. That day was exactly the day she first met Evan. And who was that her? Nina didn't think too much before seeing the answer, right in the next photo. That photo was taken inside a high-end restaurant. In the lens, only one girl appeared, with a face identical to hers. And that day, she clearly remembered gathering with friends at that restaurant, inseparable and chatting happily the whole time. How did he photograph her laughing heartily and seemingly alone? Also in this moment, she suddenly remembered. At the table back then, a friend reminded her, "There's a handsome guy peeping at you." She didn't believe it then. Where? Friend pointed a direction. "Seems to have taken your photo too." She looked over. The other party was looking at his phone seriously. Only saw the side profile, not looking like a peeper at all, thus didn't take it to heart, but only now did she understand. How could he not care? Perhaps he was adding text to the image right then, and setting it to be visible only to himself. Those 3 words, 2 words English, perhaps he would never let her see in this life, nor say easily, only using deep hidden love to mask within. "Marry me." Chapter 14. A long time ago, he had read a sentence. Beans from the same root, why burn each other so eagerly? At that time, he didn't comprehend it thoroughly. Adults often said, "Little brother is sick, you have to yield to him." Back then, he was black-bellied, rebellious, and temperamental. even doing extremely bad things, often causing the two brothers to part on bad terms. But those grudges were all from long ago. After growing up and maturing, it was just laughed off, not considered old accounts to confront. Toward things he liked, he was always extreme. If not love at first sight, absolutely not expending too much emotion. Once studying abroad, a girl pursued him directly and frankly. But he didn't give any response, not even giving a thought of charity. The other party retreated in discouragement only after losing heart. He didn't regret it either, because he didn't taste the feeling of heart moving. To say what heart moving looked like, there was no precise description either. This kind of thing couldn't be stated clearly. The heart itself would tell you, until that day. Not long after returning to the country, meeting a friend at a restaurant near his alma mater, encountering her who happened to be gathering too. He wasn't a person good at expressing, nor would he step forward to disturb their conversation just like that, then ask for her mobile number. He did like, but wouldn't startle. He just paused the reminiscence with his friend, saying someone was looking for him on his phone, then inadvertently opened the camera function, keeping her lively, laughing face in his own screen. Being good at disguise was something he had long practiced, not letting the other party spot flaws in expression, gaze flowing naturally. Never meeting her eyes for a moment, yet he almost saw through all her expressions. Silent, smiling, entangled, distressed, dull. This matter no one knew. Even after a long time, he still didn't know her name. After that, he often went to that restaurant but never saw her again. He wasn't idle. Family business kept him terribly busy. But occasionally turning on the phone to see her photo, he felt that impetuous heart settle down. Except himself, no one knew he had anxiety disorder and was taking medicine usually. Sometimes the more calm and uneventful one appeared. Maybe the heart was already overturned like rivers and seas, anxiety unbearable, just unwilling to show it in front of people. Everyone around praised him, saying his mentality was steady and decisions wise, even admired by many peers and seniors. He didn't take it seriously. He also had aspects beyond his power. For example, brotherly affection. Because Evan couldn't take planes, he couldn't go abroad for further studies after graduation like him. The family took tight care of the younger brother. Returning many years later, he didn't live at home either, but was used to being busy alone, used to alienating everything. Evan was in the same company as him. Not mentioning past estrangements and unhappiness, getting close to him again. He also slowly started caring about his brother's illness, often contacting authoritative cardiologists abroad, researching and formulating the most effective treatment plans. That day, Evan sat in his car, but unexpectedly illness attacked halfway. Taking medicine didn't help. He was in a flurry, driving to the hospital nearby. Medical staff rushed to rescue. He calmed down, called to register. In the lobby preparing to fill out forms, looking up he bumped into a girl wearing casual clothes, instantly stunned on the spot. He didn't expect to meet her here. She was also pinching a piece of paper in hand, carrying a small bag, looking around searching for something. Gaze moved over, saw him, smiled slightly. "Hello, may I ask if you're done writing?" She pointed at the pen in his hand. He lowered his head. Hadn't started writing yet, but nodded, saying, "Very fast." She smiled again, waiting quietly by the side. Unknown what he was thinking inside, peripheral vision watching her. Turning head, bowing head, tiptoeing, all tiny movements attracted him. Until finishing the form, scrutinizing and checking, only realizing he filled in his own name. Not only that, also the number. He wanted to smile bitterly, forget it, just a temporary record. He put down the pen and handed it to her, saying, "You come. Thank you." She took the pen, put the paper up, flattened it, and started writing. He stopped behind for a few seconds and glanced, saw it was an employment agreement, and the name column on it wrote, Nina Norris. From then on, these two names became his curse, occupying the mind, eroding into bone and blood, but he didn't know what else happened that day. Until not long after, he saw her photo on his own brother's phone. "Good-looking?" Evan asked. He stared straight eyes, staring at that face asking, "Who is she?" "My girlfriend," Evan said, smiling. "When did you date?" He realized he was very calm. That was precisely the worst time. "Just a few days ago." Evan put away the phone like hiding treasure, saying, "That time nearly losing my life in the hospital, she just transferred to start work. She's a little nurse. I saw her in the corridor, teased a few sentences, and she gave me her WeChat. Say, does this count as a blessing in disguise? His fist clenched deathly tight, feeling no pain, asking Evan, what did she say to you that day? Evan didn't detect the anomaly. Thought about it saying, didn't say anything, also a quite simple girl. Seeing me, she smiled shyly. Asked how I came to the hospital, I just said I was accompanying someone to see a doctor. Did she say she likes you? He felt his bone and blood turning cold, like being frozen into an ice cellar. She gets shy easily, so dares not admit. Evan thought about it, saying seriously, brother, telling you the truth, she's different from those girls I liked before. She's also not a scheming person, doesn't know my family situation. So this time you won't interfere in my affairs again, right? What else could he say? At this stage, he retreated to become a passerby without a name, forced to cruelly abandon the things treasured all along. From then on, spinning a cocoon to bind himself, he began to hide that emotion too late to reveal, only knowing what she said, what she did, what small hobbies she had from his brother's phone. Aside from that, knowing nothing. Even didn't have a face-to-face meeting again. But he also harbored some small calculations. When planning to buy a house, unknowingly, actually picked near her hospital. At that time he thought, even if one day, but who knew there really would be such a day. Evan passed away suddenly. He felt this was a chance given by heaven. He thought of setting up a secret game. Even if becoming a substitute, let her get close to him. As long as reaching that step, at all costs, he could afford to wait. For this, he begged his parents, but attracted dissatisfaction and incomprehension. He dared not say he met her first. But who would believe? Who would understand? He never was willing to say much. Later, it was the pain of losing a son that made parents mourn, finally agreeing to help him conceal and act, calling Evan's name in front of him. But that wasn't enough. He needed to race against time. Such replacement wasn't his pursuit for the future. Exposure of identity was inevitable. The result he wanted was, at the moment she knew the truth, she already couldn't leave him. But he thought wrong, and his excuse was too clumsy. She was far more calm and resolute than he thought. Even ridicule and sneer carried knives slicing his heart. That resentful, deceived look made him unbearable. The seed of anxiety spread and grew in his heart, deep-rooted together with deep love. Did he do wrong again? Evan was gone. He could have continued like the beginning, step by step getting close to her. But he was unwilling. That was originally his position. Now he just used the same method again to trick her over, transitioning those worldly eyes that might make her unable to accept. There was also hate in the bottom of his heart. That was a dissatisfaction of seeking, but not getting, instead having love stolen horizontally. Even Evan didn't know. He endured excessively, almost suffocating to death. That day, Evan's unintentional words revealed to him having relations with her. He knew that wasn't provocation, it was brotherhood saying everything. But it rawly extinguished his last retained hope. The bottom line was pulled up by the roots, unconsciously crumpling the document in hand without knowing. After hanging up the phone, he was silent for a long time. Suddenly smashed the phone against the opposite wall. Force too great, smashed into a mess. People in the general manager's office were scared. Thought something happened. Knocking to come and seeing his face extremely ugly, didn't even dare ask words, quickly closed the door again. That day he went to fix the phone, only because her photos were still inside. The first thing he thought of was actually this. He didn't have that kind of complex, just ultimately unwilling regarding her. Like ordinary men, he once fantasized what it was like to press the beloved woman in his arms. Even if that person was his brother. They were free. Even if the wood was already made into a boat, he still didn't want to give up. He only sighed at fate's unfairness, playing such a joke on him. So that the first time bringing her home, he didn't even have time to communicate with her formally. Impatiently barging into the bathroom to blend with her, pestering the defenseless her to submit to him. Only dared not face her face to face, only afraid of seeing the fervent, crazy self in her eyes, seeing another face distinct as two people. Afraid she would spot flaws in a short time. Even more afraid of being unable to endure her eyes looking at himself, but brain thinking of another person. He needed spiritual and physical comfort too much, so that after being with her, it was almost like breaking a vow. Demanding without restraint every time, praying his soul would be fulfilled, no longer wandering displaced with no fixed abode. Many times he speculated the look she gave him, hypnotizing to understand as she loved him. Over time, he almost tricked himself. This was real. Also, many times, he woke up in the middle of the night, head full of sweat. Looking at the person beside, she slept normally, arms also kept dutifully. The distance between two people wasn't far either. He interpreted as she was escaping, forcibly pulling her arm over to hug himself, kissing a few times before able to sleep again. Just being with her for a few days, he tasted the experience of worrying about gains and losses. This feeling was too terrible for him. Even the psychiatrist seeing anxiety disorder asked many times what he encountered recently. He didn't say. Loving someone was pure. He thought that couldn't be listed as illness category. He just exhausted all efforts. He considered himself domineering and selfish. But to disguise as Evan in front of her, only then didn't control so extremely. Unable to sleep on nights without her, he used handling official business time to wait for her incidentally. She nestled in arms saying not feeling well, he didn't force on. She inadvertently mentioned very shallow interests. He also just claimed suddenly seeing and bringing back for her. Even later, when she knew the truth and determined to leave, he didn't dare use tough means. Just used business trip to escape to cover inner panic and helplessness. He didn't want to continue listening to those cruel and ruthless accusations. Only dared to tail quietly at night, knowing her new residence address, watching her safe return before driving away alone. What was all this for? In the end, he found it was a big mistake. She wasn't the person he imagined who could be controlled. The person she liked was also definitely not either this or that. She also wouldn't be vague about her emotions, saying one is one, decisive and cruel. But what he expected even less was, in these days of being estranged, that seed had already been quietly planted in the bottom of her heart. Together with his, taking root and sprouting, spreading boundlessly. Just like this moment, deep night quiet people, she was lying in his arms. Echoing by the ear was exactly her calling his name. Chapter 15. Winter entered, temperature extremely low. He was going on a business trip to the north for 10 days. The night before leaving, she helped him pack luggage. From inside to outside, clothes, pants, shoes, socks, everything needed available. Putting everything needed in order, a small corner space was still left in the luggage. Put what? She racked her brains thinking. He just finished showering and came out. Seeing her sitting at the head of the bed dazing, coming over to circle her waist from behind. Thinking what? She covered the hand on her waist, body leaning back into his embrace, thinking what else you need. He looked once inside the luggage, saying, "It is still lacking a bit." Lacking what? She turned back asking. Behind the ear scattered scorching breath, his voice low, "Want to take you away together." She shrank her neck from the tickle. "I still have to work." "Take leave?" Number asked last time already. "Recently have evaluation. You look busier than me." He specifically picked her sensitive places to blow air. "When leave some time for me?" She heard the grievance. Laughed softly. "Isn't it now?" A very normal sentence, he heard teasing and invitation. Pulled her clothes shoulder. She hurriedly stopped. Haven't finished organizing yet." "No need, just like this. The empty place exactly for bringing you gifts." While speaking, he leaned up to kiss her, only touched the corner of the lip. Her face red and ears hot. Afraid he would play tricks. Both hands grabbing him, but body couldn't move. Hummed a few times, a bit uncomfortable, saying, "I'll go put the suitcase away." His hand long. The spare hand reached up from behind, covered directly. She suddenly remembered last time falling out, she packed luggage to leave. He also slammed it shut tyrannically like this. In the end, instead, it was he himself packing to leave. She nestled in his arms, looking at him asking, "That day, where did you go later?" He brought her up to kick the suitcase off the bed, then hugging her lying in the soft bedding. "Which day?" "Just the one you said going on business trip," he recalled. "Went to a friend's hotel." "Why lie to me?" "Wanted to let you continue staying at home," she pursued. "Parking in other people's spot, also didn't want me to discover." He touched her face, saying, "Knowing I was at home, would you still dare come back?" She shook her head. "Definitely wouldn't at that time." His heart seemed scratched. Kissed her lightly a few times. Said, "Don't say that sentence in front of me in the future." "What sentence?" She blinked, recalling. He didn't even want to mention those two words, like a taboo vocabulary. Changed a meaning, saying, "Don't say separate," she remembered. At that time, she was very angry, but wasn't speaking wild words either. That was normal reaction to being deceived. But how would her back then think, now would lie in his arms chatting about this and even relievedly comforting him? Won't say any more. He hugged her tight with satisfaction, then licking her eyes, kissing. She was long used to his opening like this. Hugging his neck, counting, "You seem to be every day recently." He kissed while looking up at her. She lowered her line of sight, releasing his head, gradually exploring down. Dared not make him unhappy. Nothing. Just I'm afraid of pregnancy. Don't want to have children. He stopped, breath spraying her. She considered words. No, a bit too early. I'm busy with exams for the next year. You're too tired. He propped up. Have you thought about changing to an easier job? She thought he was unhappy, hesitated, saying, I'm already preparing. He heard her caution. Sighed, forget it, I won't force you. She released tension wholeheartedly. Really afraid, he misunderstood she didn't want children. His hair was very soft. Light touch carried warm wetness, as if cool intent in the air seeped inside. When she panicked, wanting to flee, he laughed low, looking above, asking, Want to kiss me? She didn't know how to answer. Kiss me, he ordered. She obediently kissed up, tasted her own flavor from it, surprisingly didn't repel. Who am I? He asked suddenly. Ethan. She answered, indulging in the kiss. He was satisfied, stopped a while, asking again, Who is Ethan? Is you. He is what person to you? She closed eyes tight, obeying him, answered clearly, Husband. He buried head, not speaking anymore. After a long time, asked relentlessly, Who am I? She retained a shred of clarity. Also stuck uncomfortably by him, hand lightly hit his back, annoying or not, always asking this. He blew her cheek, torturing, Answer me. Ethan. Her heart suddenly felt a trace of pain. Added, Is my husband. Do you love him? Is the person I love most. The third day of Ethan's business trip. When Nina was organizing the study, she saw a small medicine bottle hidden inside his desk. She knew this. It was anti-anxiety. She took out the medicine bottle, flipped casually inside further. Found nothing, pulled the lower drawer again. None. She got up and circled once on the spot. Always felt it was inside the study, walking to the bookshelf. Suddenly remembered the place hiding marriage certificate last time. She reached out to touch a rather special document case. Untied with string, pulled out some document papers from inside, mostly official documents. She flipped through quickly. Indeed, saw several medical reports sandwiched among them. Pulling those reports out, Nina read on the spot. Noticed the earliest time was at the beginning of the year. She remembered he said, at that time he just returned to the country. Next day, Nina made an appointment with Ethan's attending doctor. At another hospital. You are Mr. Evans. Doctor looked at her, inquiring. I am his wife. She sat down, saying truth. He doesn't know I came. I found the case history unintentionally, so came to find you. He got married? Doctor looked very incredulous. Married not long ago. Presumptuous to ask your name? Nina didn't understand, but confessed, My name is Nina. Nina, the other party nodded with slightly lingering flavor. Then it is you. What is me? The other party took one of the medical records she brought, saying, That time I did a small treatment for him. He once unintentionally recited your name. Nina narrowed eyes, looking at the report. The handwriting above was flying dragons and dancing phoenixes. Didn't write details of the name. Looked up, hearing other parties say again, I asked him. He didn't admit. I didn't mention later. Did you once break his heart? Nina opened mouth, didn't know how to refute. I came wanting to ask how to make him stop using medicine. Does he still use medicine now? Doctor recalled saying, The last time he came was already a month ago. Since you married, usually care for him more. Under family company will slowly get better. She asked again, Are his symptoms severe? Doctor answered, Compared to anxiety in his work, emotional ones are especially heavier. Nina walked out of the hospital, raised hand seeing sunlight shine on face through fingers. Squinted eyes feeling a while, exhaled lightly. Continue walking forward. That night, he video called her in the hotel, asked where she went today doing what. She naturally wouldn't tell the truth. Thinking of symptoms on his medical record, intentionally did a probe. I went to a cafe, bumped into a guy chatting a while. Chatted what? Person in video was originally busy organizing things at hand. Hearing this concentrated attention to look at her. Nina guilty. thinking he temporarily didn't have that big aura pressing over there. Continued making up, just hit on me, asked my WeChat, also asked my name and age. She carefully noticed his expression, found no discoloration. Could it be this matter had no threatening power to him, or was it he pretended well, she underestimated him? He lowered head giving looked at her asking again. How did you answer? How do you hope I answer? She looked expectantly. He hooked lips slightly. I remember, didn't you say wouldn't take off the ring I gave you? She was thinking what this meant. Rolled eyes saying, right, no need to talk nonsense either, he said. Show the ring to the other party. It was a relatively direct method, but he surprisingly didn't care much. But I already told him, she whispered. He still smiled. Face suddenly approached screen, looking at her saying, don't lie to me. There's basically no such thing. She was messed up by his sudden exposure. Pursed lips denying, really have. He still didn't believe. Really have, you wouldn't tell me. She couldn't pretend horizontally or vertically. Simply admitted, okay, it was me talking randomly. How did you tell? Your face is written full of probing. Nina touched face with both palms, confident impossible to be seen. Instead, this action exposed herself more. She pretended lost look. Then you seem not to care about this matter either. Because I trust you. She looked at him seriously. The night before leaving, you said I am the person you love most. He mentioned this matter, face smiling proudly. She remembered. At that time made confused by him, speaking without brain. But more like babble from the bottom of heart. Nina, he called her. He looked at her across the screen, face full of desire. I miss you. His eyes too fervent. She lowered head shyly a while, said, when are you coming back? Saturday night. She immediately calculated. Wait for you to come back. I cook dishes for you to eat. He laughed over there. I love eating whatever you make. Ethan's plane delayed that day returning. Already 9 o'clock at night when arriving home. Nina contacted him a few hours ago. Let him eat something to fill stomach first. She simply cooked a bowl of noodles and ate hastily too. When he entered door, she welcomed up to help him take suitcase. Asked. Went to company? No. Came right after getting off plane. He hugged her face on kissing, unwilling to separate for half a moment, like leaving home for months. She pushed his body. Are you hungry? Eaten yet? He pinched her waist playfully. Just want to eat you. No, she pushed him away subconsciously. Said again, I'll go stir-fry some hot dishes for you. He followed into kitchen. Saw meat stewing in pot on side. Vegetables on board were cut long ago. Asked. Been waiting for me. She covered nose. Heated oil throwing vegetables saying, done right away, you go outside wait. Smoke smell big here. He looked above. Range hood operating. Smoke smell all sucked away, waiting for dish finished. She served on table with 2 hands, said, rice is still hot, you eat first. You, he looked at a pair of chopsticks in her hand. I ate already. She specially put a bit of chili in the dish. Herself didn't dare taste. Asked him how's the taste. He picked up a chopstick eating, nodded, not bad. She smiled satisfied, but saw him pick up a piece of meat coming over, saying, you eat too. She smelled that taste, some indescribable greasiness, immediately hid far, waved hand saying, no need. He saw her face color strange, hand loosely covering nose, asked, something wrong? She looked at him hesitating to speak, nodded gravely. He looked at her a while, moved chair, hand patted on leg. Come here, she went over obediently, sat on his leg, circled by waist. Tell me. He seemed to coax patiently, voice a trace expectant and nervous. Say it. She was silent for a long time, also thought for a long time, only then slowly spoke. I'm pregnant. He didn't ask pregnant with what? Asked. How long? Just 1 month, checked out this morning. Person behind had no sound. She turned back looking at his face. Asked, what's wrong with you? He seemed to just come back to senses. Hooked lips kissing her saying, thinking about life later, what month child born? Like you or like me, what school for him in future? She laughed out, you think too early. Not early. He couldn't help scraping her nose. That is our child. Do you like children? She seemed to ask an idiot question. He couldn't suppress excitement, buried head in her abdomen listening carefully. Seems to have movement. She was amused, pushed him, too small now, have to be later. He raised head, eyes looking at her resentfully. Can't want you at night. Her heart tip trembled, hooked his neck shaking. I haven't said yet. My plans are all messed up, and I remember you wore that. Maybe that one time. When, he reminded, at Mom and Dad's home. There were no measures there. She remembered too. Next day up still didn't give her chance to take medicine. Questioned him. Were you intentional that time? He confessed. Yes, she lowered head, embarrassed to say this more. So changed topic. Didn't you say bringing me gift? Where is it? He laughed open, patted her butt. In the suitcase, see yourself or I give you. She got up immediately, ran into bedroom. I see myself. Slow down, he said in living room. Nina opened suitcase with effort. Found layout inside completely same as she organized originally. This man was really meticulous, incomparable. Suitcase corner put a small box, should be gift undoubtedly. She took it out. Peel open layer by layer. Until finally opening box lid. Inside was a necklace, dazzling flashing. She lifted out chain. Saw design at bottom pendant was 2 conjoined letters, shape smooth and rich in aesthetic feeling. What meaning those 2 letters represented. Already permeated meaning in her ring. Like it? Unknown when. He squatted down at side. She held necklace pendant in palm, leaning on him, curving lips saying, like. How much like? She didn't answer, sealed with kiss, and he supported back of her head, hugged her up. Deepen this kiss.